Hey, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I am so glad to be here with all of you tonight. We're going to have a great late night conversation. A lot we can talk about tonight, and a lot that we can review, and a lot we can do. It's going to be fun. So hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. We are going to have yet another late night conversation. I'm here in my lovely Brooklyn apartment. It is a late Saturday night, just 10 o'clock, 10 p.m. Eastern time. We're going to have a great conversation. Let's go.
The American century. I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is just a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action.
Welcome, 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 everybody. I am so glad to be here with all of you tonight. It should be yet another great conversation. Heading towards the end of August, summer's wrapping up. We're heading into the fall of 2023. A lot of exciting things are happening, and I'm so glad to be here with all of you tonight. So glad to be here with all of you tonight. So hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. Make sure that you are subscribed because they are messing with us like crazy on the subscriptions on YouTube. If you're watching on the Rockfin or the Rumble, shout out to you. I see a dingo ate me baby hi com fam on Rumble, and I see Victory Gin on Rockfin, and I see lots and lots of people on YouTube. So yeah, we are doing our best to get around the algorithmic suppression, and we continue to be doing great work. Peter Coffin had a great film that came out today, Marks for Sale. I don't know if you saw it. Tremendous work, Peter Coffin. We showed the stream, the trailer of it last night on this channel, and the movie came out and it blew all of our expectations. A great film critiquing the social media consumer culture surrounding Marxism on the internet. That was really, really a great piece of work. We love Peter Coffin. Peter Coffin does so much great work. He's made great films on many topics. Overpopulation is bullshit. Less sucks. And he's made films about the Center for Political Innovation as well. We love Peter Coffin, and it's really, really great to be able to plug and host him on this channel. Few things before we get started here. Few quick announcements. One of the quick announcements that we're going to do here is I want to remind people that I do have a new book that will be released probably in less than 48 hours. Fingers crossed. Alhamdulillah, as they say in the Middle East. God willing, if the creek don't rise, as they say in the South. And it appears that this book is on the brink of publication. This is the book that I have written. It is 280 some pages long. Longer than I thought it would be, but I guess that's how things work when it's a smaller book and you add a lot of graphics and such. I thought it would be less than 100 pages. It was about 100 pages when I wrote it, but it's 287 pages in the version that we've got that should be available very shortly. Our aim is Monday, might be a little later than that, but we're hoping that by Monday this is available. And, people may not understand why this book is necessary, but I'll tell you why it's necessary. Because in the United States, if you're doing communism on the internet, that doesn't matter. It does not matter. If you're on the internet talking about being a communist and you're the one true Trotskyite, or you're the true follower of Stalin, no one cares. But if you're doing communist organizing in real life with a real organization, organizing real protests and real demonstrations, and out on the streets engaging with real people about why communism is good, one of the main organizations, probably the most visible organization in the United States promoting communism is the Revolutionary Communist Party, the RCP. And the leader of the RCP, the Revolutionary Communist Party, is Bob Avakian. And the RCP has a lot of problems. The RCP is not friendly with any currently existing socialist government. They denounce Cuba, they denounce China, they denounce Venezuela, they denounce Nicaragua. They are not friendly with any existing communist government in the world. And on Ukraine, the war in Ukraine, they are neutral. They condemn the American government, but they demonize Russia. This group, they call themselves Marxist, Leninist, Maoists, and they take a neutral position. And so they are very visible, and they've had quite an amazing history. And so as somebody who aspires to set the tone of discourse in the United States about communism, as somebody who is a committed anti-imperialist and someone who's loyal to the global communist movement, wants to see the defeat of American imperialism, wants to see the United States reborn as a socialist society and the dismantling of imperialism, I figured it was absolutely necessary for me to write a text that assesses the history of the Revolutionary Communist Party, praises them for what they've achieved, what they've accomplished, goes over their shortcomings ideologically, and shows where their worldview is fundamentally flawed. And in addition to that, I was presented with some information about the Revolutionary Communist Party and some, I don't know how to put this. I don't want to reveal too much yet, but some information about the Revolutionary Communist Party and things they have done over the years that were more than they seemed, and people that they were serving and accountable to that would not meet the eye. There are two major revelations in the very end of this book about the Revolutionary Communist Party and their activities over the past 30, 40 years. There's two big revelations, and those revelations are going to make a lot of people, I don't know. They'll make people angry, I think. They'll make people nervous, but they'll also say a lot. It's a very important. There's two big reveals at the end of this book, and they're both very important, and you'll be surprised by them. So, my hope is that the Revolutionary Communist Party, Bob Avakian, will read this book. It is written in the form of a letter to Bob Avakian. And my hope is that Bob Avakian will respond and will read what I wrote in my letter to Bob Avakian and will offer a response, a rebuttal, etc. I do not expect this. I expect that the Revolutionary Communist Party will be so paranoid, and they'll think this is some kind of COINTEL pro-government operation. They'll just ignore it. That's my expectation. I think they'll just pretend this didn't happen. But I think we should do everything possible to make sure that the Revolutionary Communist Party knows about this book. And so after this book is published, I call on this community to do everything they can to make sure the RCP knows about this. I would call on people to call up the bookstores that they run around the country and talk to them about it. I would call on people to tweet at their, social media accounts, and I would like them to know about this book, and I would like them to respond. I really doubt they will, but let's see, if what I'm saying is false, right? If they have evidence that it's false, they should put it forward. If what I'm saying is true, they should acknowledge it and justify it. And that this book is going to blow people's minds, because one of the main things I do, the opening section of this book defends them. I decided to write this book a year ago because I don't know if you all remember, but the Supreme Court overturned Roe versus Wade and made it possible for states to outlaw abortion. And the Revolutionary Communist Party, the RCP, was one of the main groups organizing protests in support of abortion. They organized an organization called Rise Up for Abortion Rights that's led by one of their members, a woman named Sunsara Taylor. And she was leading protests around the country in support of abortion. Now, I don't agree with the way they approached this. I mean, I am pro-choice, but I don't agree with emphasizing that. I don't think that should be the focus of what communists focus on. And I also don't agree with the way these protests were carried out. Some of them were explicitly disrespectful to religious people. They had members that went and protested in church services, and that's not respectful, and I don't think people should engage in that kind of behavior. It's just not acceptable. But that said, the Revolutionary Communist Party, they were doing what liberals all said you should do. They started protesting in support of abortion. AOC had a protest along with Sunsara Taylor where they were standing next to each other. And so they did this. And what was the response of the mainstream media? The mainstream media declared that the Revolutionary Communist Party was a cult. And Yahoo News and the Daily Beast and The Intercept and Vice News all ran hit pieces on the Revolutionary Communist Party, claiming that the RCP is a cult. And it was ridiculous. One of the articles claimed the RCP is co-opting social movements or co-opting the language of social justice. Well, that's ridiculous, because anyone who knows anything about the RCP knows that they've been marching against police brutality since before I was born. So to say that they're co-opting Black Lives Matter, no, Black Lives Matter is co-opting them. They've been protesting wars since before I was born. And the allegation that there's some kind of cult, the allegation that they're co-opting social movements is a bullshit allegation. So the first section of my book defends them against the lies and smears of mainstream media. And I explicitly praise Bob Avakian for his achievements and how difficult it has been for him to keep the Revolutionary Communist Party together, the persecution that he's faced. He was forced to flee the country in the 1980s, in the early 1980s. And so I start out the book by defending them against the vicious attacks from the mainstream media and from the establishment. But from there, I begin criticizing their worldview. And from there, I criticize their alliance with Joe Biden. I point out that, look, you did everything you could. You even endorsed Joe Biden in the 2020 election, and they still canceled you, and they still smeared you, and they called you a cult. And then I dropped the two big bombshells, I'm not going to reveal them here tonight. We'll talk about them. I've got a few interviews lined up about the book. There's going to be people interviewing me about the book. I'll drop the bombshells in those interviews. I'm not ready to drop those bombshells yet here tonight. But I'm going to reveal two big bombshells about the Revolutionary Communist Party, and then I end the book. And I end the book by critiquing their view of religion and saying that they approach the question of idealism versus materialism and spirituality and religion in a completely wrong way. And that's how I end the book. And it's almost 300 pages long. The two big revelations are probably the most important aspect of the book. I point out two things about them, two things about their history that are big, two big revelations about, it's connected to intelligence. Let me just put it that way. There's two big revelations in this book that are connected to the world of spies and intelligence and covert manipulation. And I reveal two big things about this organization and who they've been accountable to over the years, and I provide evidence to back it up. That's the book. And so I hope that you all will get a copy. As soon as it's available, I'll be tweeting it out. It'll be available. And I hope that you do everything in your power to make the Revolutionary Communist Party aware that this book exists. And we'll see how they respond. We shall see. Now, again, I've told you that my expectation is that the RCP will just ignore it, but let's give them a chance. Let them respond. Let them respond. All right. That's the first announcement that I wanted to make. The next announcement that I wanted to make, which is also very important, right? And this is something that's been going on for a little while, but I just want to make sure people are aware of this, right? Because people may have forgotten, people may not be taking it as seriously as it should be taken. But every single morning, the Center for Political Innovation has a morning message. And it's from different members around the country. Many different members have done messages. Every single morning, not every Monday, not every weekday, every single day. Every single day. Tomorrow will be day number 42, I believe. We have been going for 42 days straight. Every single day we have a morning message. And these morning messages are very, very different. We've had one message so far. It was from John McCarthy, and he didn't even go for a whole minute. He went for less than a minute, and he was out in front of the Jimmy Dore show in Chicago, and he talked about doing outreach and promoting the Center for Political Innovation and supporting the Uhuru movement that are under attack. And he talked about that, it was less than a minute. Somebody else did a message that went on for 20 minutes. 20 minutes they went on, and they talked about communism and philosophy and all kinds of things. We've had people on there reading poems. We have had people on there telling stories. We have had people on there reflecting on their own life. We've had people on there reading to us from Marxist books, reading passages from revolutionary books. We have done all kinds of things. This program of having a morning message every morning from the Center for Political Innovation is so important. And the reason it is important is because it keeps our membership and our allies and friends plugged in every single day. Every single day, we have a message that comes up. We haven't missed a day yet. And, the day I miss a day will be a very bad day, and it hasn't happened yet. Every single day, we have a message. And I want you, usually the messages are 3 to 5 minutes, sometimes less, sometimes more. I want you to listen to the messages. Because they're short. I want you to start your day every day with these messages because it will set the tone for your day. Because our mission at the Center for Political Innovation is such a unique and important mission. We are trying to stop the danger of a new world war. We are trying to build a working class movement of resistance. We are trying to mobilize against the degrowth fascists and build an anti-monopoly coalition. We are trying to teach people the socialist ideology that built the labor movement, that defeated Jim Crow segregation, that stopped the Vietnam War, that's done so much. We are trying to keep the spirit of the revolutionary socialist movement alive at a time when that message has been so ruthlessly and disgustingly co-opted by the most sinister and evil wing of our ruling class. Most socialist groups in the United States have gone woke, and as a result, they gone broke. The Communist Party USA is nothing but a Democratic Party fundraising committee. It's nothing but a Democratic Party volunteer organization. The Workers' World Party, at this point, they've closed down their New York City office. Their newspaper that comes out is only 4 pages long. Used to be a full weekly newspaper. It's not even in print anymore. It's only online, and it's less than 4 pages long. It's ridiculous. They are dying as an organization. And communism is more popular than ever. More people than ever before are reading about socialism and Marxism. But the communist groups are all rolling over and dead and dying and bleeding out. And the reason for that is because they've gone woke. Is because instead of sticking up for their Marxist principles, instead of sticking up for the countries that are under attack from U.S. imperialism, the socialist bloc, the anti-imperialist bloc of the world that is blossoming and blooming with BRICS. Instead of that, they have attached themselves to the Ford Foundation and George Soros and Kamala Harris and AOC, and they've attached themselves to the project of defending the establishment from Donald Trump, which is not what they should be doing. So what we're doing with the Center for Political Innovation, teaching genuine socialist politics, promoting anti-imperialism and solidarity with those who are under attack. What we are doing is so important. So important. I cannot think of anything more important than what we are doing, right? With all due respect to other things in your life, I cannot think of a project or a mission that could be more important than this. We are holding the candle up and keeping the flame burning in the wind, and it is not easy. And in order to stay on track, and in order to stay optimistic, I would urge you every single morning to start your day with a morning message. Because if you are looking for a life that has meaning, if you are looking for a life that has purpose, become an anti-imperialist. And this is something that will keep you plugged in. And I have so many people who come to me and say, Caleb, I'm feeling depressed. Caleb, I'm feeling hopeless. And I say, have you been listening to the morning messages? Have you been involving yourself in the organization? Have you been trying to build a revolutionary movement? And they say, no. Well, I say, no wonder you're feeling that way. No wonder you're feeling isolated. No wonder you're feeling disconnected. No wonder you're feeling like your life doesn't have a purpose, because there's a purpose right in front of you. There's an organization right in front of you. There are methods of connecting with other people right in front of you. There is an analysis of the world that is clear and coherent right in front of you, and you're not pursuing it. You're not jumping on it. You're not following it. You're not taking this opportunity. So of course you're feeling that way, right? Of course you're feeling alienated and isolated and alone. So I want everyone to make sure to tune into the morning messages. Today's morning message was from Peter Coffin. And Peter Coffin did a great message talking about his upcoming film that was just released today. It was then upcoming, Marks for Sale. It was great. We've had Nick Brana of the People's Party do them. We've had many, many different CPI members do them. Great message coming tomorrow. Great message from Gabby on Friday. We're doing great stuff. So just want to remind everybody to do it. And the call is open, even if you are not a member of the Center for Political Innovation. If you feel so inspired, make a morning message and send it my way. You can send it my way, and I'll watch it first, and I will most likely put it on the YouTube channel. All right? I mean, I guess if you were naked, I won't put it on. If you're, saying communism is evil or something, I won't put it on. But for the most part, I will put you on. We want to have a diversity of views, a diversity of messages. So listen to the morning messages. Every single morning we do them. Stay plugged in to the organization. So those are the announcements I wanted to get out of the way as we get going here. So now I just want to remind people of how we do things here, which is that I give my opening remarks, which is what I'm doing right now. And while I am giving my opening remarks, I am writing down your super chat questions or your Rockfin tip questions or your Rumble rant questions. The second half of our show is just me answering your questions, talking about what it is you want me to talk about. You want to ask me a question about history. You want to make a comment about current events. You want to say something about the world. Give me something to react to in the second half of the show. The second half of the show is all you guys. It is all you guys. You guys are the second half of our program. It is all you. But I need you to do it. I need you to send in questions. I need you to send in comments. I need you to give me something to react to. I need you to send me Rumble rants on the Rumble. I need you to send me Rockfin tips on the Rockfin. I need you to send super chats on the YouTube. Give me something to talk about in the second half of our program. And I want to remind everyone who's watching live right now that you are in the privileged 10%. because there's many people who will watch this afterwards. They'll watch it tomorrow or the next day, but you are in that privileged minority of people who watch this live. So you have the ability to change the course of how the show is going. I keep my eye on the chat. And if you use your power with a super chat, the conversation can go the way you want it to go. And that puts you ahead. So I encourage you to use that power wisely. Get me talking about what is important to you. I will do my best to give an answer. May not be the answer you're looking for, but I usually give my best answer. Throw me a softball and I'll knock it out of the park for you. Throw me a hard ball and I'll still knock it out of the park for you. Every so often there is a question that someone asks me, hey, what's your opinion of blah, 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 blah? I don't know what that is. I can't answer it, but usually I do. So use your power wisely. Send me a super chat to get me talking about what is important to you, right? Alex, some Maoists say a peace movement is unnecessary. All right, I'm writing it down. That's the first super chat of the night. Some Maoists say a peace movement is unnecessary. Wrote it down. That'll be the first question, and keep them rolling in, because it is people like you. It is you who are watching now who make the second half of our show happen. So on that note, folks, I am now going to begin my opening remarks. I'm going to begin my opening remarks. I'll be writing down these super chat questions as they come in. I'd like us all to just take a minute. Take a minute to breathe. Take a minute to slow down. Slow down a little bit. Breathe. Relax. Loosen up your shoulders. Saturday night. Saturday evening. Relax. There's a lot of serious things in the world. We tend to be very serious on these live streams. We talk about very serious issues, but I want you to relax. I want you to breathe easy. I want you to sit back in your chair. I want you to stretch a little bit. Stretch a little bit if you can. I want you to get comfortable. I want you to enjoy yourself. I want to thank you for being here. I want to thank you for being here. Not just because I'm happy to see numbers on my screen. Not just because it brings me joy to know I'm not simply talking at my bookshelves, that there are people listening to me, and I enjoy seeing what you have to say, and I enjoy having a back and forth. That's not the only reason I want to thank you here tonight. Not the only reason I want to thank you here tonight. I want to thank you for being here. I want to commend you for being here. Because everything in the world has been done to keep you from being here. Everything in the world has been done to try and prevent you from doing what you are doing right now. You have no idea the great lengths they have gone to try and prevent you from hearing what I have to say, from knowing about the Center for Political Innovation and its mission. When we first started doing these live streams, there was 5 people watching, there was 6 people watching. After a while, there was 20 or 30 people watching. I remember the first time I ever got 100 people watching, really big deal. First time it got up to 200 people, really big deal. I started doing debates with various BreadTube personalities. Destiny Stephen Bonnell invited me on his show, and I completely wiped the floor with him. He had that arrogance. He assumed that all the socialist countries had never had any successes, and I brought facts with me about their economic achievements. And that sucked me into a world called BreadTube. And as people from the BreadTube community started piling in here, after I defeated Vosh in a debate, just destroyed Vosh, after these live streams started blowing up during the pandemic, at that point, they just started unloading video after video, trying to tell you all that somehow what we're advocating on these live streams is white supremacy. Even though we celebrate the Civil Rights Congress and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X and the Black Panthers, even though I've been marching against police brutality my entire adult life, I even video recorded an act of police brutality and got a black teenage girl acquitted in court because of my video. Even because of that, no, they claimed that somehow these live streams are promoting white supremacism. And they were relentless with this. Relentless. It just had to be true. No. And they got YouTube channels that are huge, that have hundreds of thousands of subscribers, to claim that what we are advocating here is white supremacy. And every communist space on Reddit, on Facebook, started banning anything to do with this community, claiming, well, they're white supremacists. They're white supremacists. We are not white supremacists. This is false. This is ridiculous. And then they continued attacking us. And as the Center for Political Innovation came into existence, they sent infiltrators into our organization to dig into aspects of my personal life and try to use that and lie and distort things and exaggerate and manipulate things. They have gone to extreme lengths to prevent you from ever listening to what is said on these streams. They've gone to ridiculously insane lengths. Ridiculously insane lengths. And another thing that they did is they found people that sound similar to me, that have similar views on certain topics. Rumble rant. Oh, it's Mariah. Thoughts on the anomalies that took place in Maui. Very good. I'll definitely talk about that. Very good. I'm cutting and pasting that one, right? And thank you, Mariah. And they went to ridiculous lengths, right? They had people that kind of sounded similar to us, that aren't building an organization, and that are going out of their way to offend people, going out of their way to make enemies out of people who might be gay or people who might be transgender or people that, people that might not be into ultra masculinity. They propped up people, I think you all know who I'm talking about, who aren't building an in real life organization, but sound similar in what they say about foreign policy and how they claim some vague loyalty to communism. And they pumped them up. And they put them out there because there's no danger of them forming an organization. And on top of that, they will make sure to offend and scare away anybody who is not, some kind of ultra-masculine, gay-hating, woman-hating person. And they did that. They did that to try and keep you from watching us. They have done everything they can. Vicious attacks on me, vicious attacks on my character, vicious lies about our community, pumping up people who sound similar but will channel people in a different direction and offend other people and keep them away from it. Is an elaborate operation that they have carried out to try and keep you from listening to these streams. And all you have to do to see through it is listen to what I have to say, or better yet, attend a Center for Political Innovation event, a workshop, a conference, and you will know that everything you've been told is a lie. And they have lied to you from every different angle. They lied to you and said we're white supremacists. We are not white supremacists. That's very clear. Many of us are not white. They lied and said we hate gay and lesbian and transgender people. There's gay and lesbian transgender people in our organization. There's also people of religious backgrounds or feminist persuasions who might object to that kind of thing. We're not here to talk about that. We formed the organization to not talk about it, not to preach hate, and not to demand full, automatic promotion of that issue, just to not talk about it. We formed this organization to not talk about it. And they've told you, okay. They've told you that we're some kind of mind control cult, that we're going to brainwash you. That's very clear that it's not the case if you come to any of our events. They've told you all kinds of things. They've just gone out of their way to lie. If one lie doesn't work, well, then they tell you another lie. They got another lie. They got a lie for every group of people. And you're still here. And you're still listening. And you're still watching this. That's the psychological equivalent of climbing Mount Everest. That's like becoming a bodybuilder. This is the intellectual strength of becoming a weightlifter, an expert weightlifter. All the weight in the world is there to prevent you from lifting it. And you have the strength to go, and you lift that bar. In order to be listening like you are right now, you have to have the strength, psychologically speaking, of an army. Because everything in the world has been done to try and convince you not to have the bravery to actually listen to what we have to say, to actually understand what it is we are advocating here. The fact that you came here indicates that you are one of the strongest people that you know. You're stronger than your classmates. You're stronger than your coworkers. You're stronger than your neighbors. None of them have had the courage to do what you have done and actually come here and listen to this with an open mind. And maybe you don't agree with everything you hear. Maybe you do. But you realize that what you've been told is a lie. And anyone who's here for more than 10, 15 minutes knows that we are not on here preaching any of the things that we're accused of preaching. We're on here preaching anti-racism, class struggle, class unity. We are on here preaching anti-imperialism and solidarity with the people of the world. We are on here preaching that people should work together and come together around an economic program to reboot the country. We're on here preaching something that has nothing to do with what we're accused of preaching from 5 or 6 different angles. And you're psychologically strong enough to come here and be part of this. And for that, you deserve to be commended. Because in order to admit that the emperor has no clothes, the emperor has no clothes. The emperor is naked. And even though all the crowds of people are claiming that the emperor is clothed, you are brave enough to point out that he is naked. RedTube is lying. The smear artists are lying. The dude bros are lying. And what we're doing here is very unique and special because it does not fit any of the acceptable categories created for us by our tech overlords. We are not right-wing. We are not left-wing. We are not conservative. We are not liberal. We are genuine anti-imperialists. We are the worst nightmare of the ruling elite. The financial oligarchy that rules over this world is utterly terrified of people talking the way we talk on these streams. If I was just on here saying, oh my God, this person is transphobic, this person's racist, they wouldn't care. If I was on here saying, oh my God, faggots, transphobes, transgender people, queers, you're a bunch of, if I was doing that, they wouldn't care. But what I'm doing on here is teaching Marxism. What I'm doing on here is teaching a message that brings people together. What I'm doing on here is what they are most afraid of. And I'm not faking it. I am not faking it. If I were faking it, they wouldn't be afraid of this. If I were cynical, dare I use the word grifter, they wouldn't be afraid of this. But because I am genuine, because I believe every word that comes out of my mouth, and because there is passion behind my words and spiritual power behind my words, because I don't just say this, I don't just know this, but I feel it in my soul. Because there is a fire burning deep within me and a fire burning deep within you, they are utterly terrified of what is happening here. This is their worst nightmare. It's true, it's bold, and it is sincere. And you are here consuming the forbidden fruit, consuming the forbidden flame, listening to what they do not want anyone to hear under any circumstances. And that is why you being here is so important. I commend you for it. And we talk about all kinds of different things on these streams. We go in one direction, we go in another direction. We go in so many different directions on these streams. And for tonight, I would like to just kind of remind you where I came from. Just tell the stories. I used to tell these stories a lot more, but we've been doing so many different things lately. That we seem to have moved away from some of the truths upon which this community is founded. We haven't moved away from them, but we've shelved them for a time. Now it's time to take them off the shelf. Now it's time to revisit them. Why am I here? How did I get to be here? Well, I got to be here because when I was a child, a pre-adolescent, I started learning about communism. Didn't learn about it in school, but I learned about it from my father, learned about it from reading books. I became aware that there was this movement that had existed in the 20th century called communism. And what I was told about communism was that communism has failed everywhere it's ever been tried. It's never been successful. And the reason that it has never been successful, I was told, is because of human nature. That communism believes all people should be equal. All people should be paid exactly the same. They should all be equal, that's a complete distortion of the ideas. And that this is contrary, we're told, to human nature. Human beings are competitive. Human beings are greedy. So it fails everywhere it has ever been tried. The Soviet Union fell, and so you can't have communism. That's what I was told about communism. And my mother, a deeply religious woman, she also told me what was believed by some of the religious influences in her life, that communism was unchristian because it was an attempt to build heaven on earth without God, and that only God could create a communist world. Communists sought to do it without God, and so that was why it was a failed attempt. That, when Jesus returns, when the world ends, it'll be something like communism, but only God can create it. Communists want to achieve heaven on earth without God. That was what I was told. But I thought about communism a lot because it sounded fascinating. And it seemed like so many of the problems in the world that I was becoming aware of were rooted in the drive to make profits. People not having enough to eat, people not having wages, wars being waged for the profits of military corporations. I was starting to become aware of some of these things. They all seem to be rooted in the capitalist system. But everyone said you have to have capitalism because communism just doesn't work anywhere it's ever been tried. It just failed everywhere. But as I was getting more and more interested in communism, I wanted to learn more about it. I decided that I would read a book by Leon Trotsky because Stalin had killed Trotsky, and Trotsky had believed in a communism that was different than the Soviet Union. So I thought, well, maybe I can learn about Trotsky's brand of communism. Maybe I can learn about Trotsky's brand of communism and how it was different than what the Soviet Union did, how it's different than what Fidel Castro did, how it's different than North Korea or China. Because all those countries never had any successes, I was told, never achieved anything. But maybe this Trotsky guy, maybe he's different. So I remember I got my hands on the book, The Revolution Betrayed. I thought the title was really, really great. The Revolution Betrayed. That'll explain why the Soviet Union wasn't really communist. The Revolution Betrayed. And so I opened, as a fifth grader, The Revolution Betrayed. I might have been a little older than that, maybe 6th or 7th grade. But I opened The Revolution Betrayed by Leon Trotsky. I opened it. I opened The Revolution Betrayed. And The first chapter of The Revolution Betrayed by Leon Trotsky is called What Has Been Achieved. That's the name of the first chapter. What has been achieved? And I started reading what has been achieved. And I started seeing numbers. Numbers. The amount of electrification that was going on. How the Soviet Union was rapidly increasing electrification, building some of the world's largest power plants in the world. I read about agricultural output and how the grain and the wheat and the production of crops in the Soviet Union was vastly expanding. I read about how the Soviet Union was producing more tractors than any other country in the world. I read about how the Soviet Union was greatly expanding its railway system. I read about all of this massive industrialization, the oil industry being created. I read statistic after statistic about the Soviet Union having huge economic successes. And I thought, well, this can't be true. This can't be true. Because everybody knows that communism failed everywhere it's ever been tried. Everywhere it's ever been tried, communism has failed. Everywhere it's ever been tried. So this can't be actually true. These statistics can't be real. They can't be real numbers because communism has failed everywhere it's ever been tried. These numbers can't be real. So I went to the public library and I got out the encyclopedia. And I read the statistics in the section of the encyclopedia about the Soviet Union, and I read about Soviet economy. And I noticed that the encyclopedia spent a lot of time talking about the famine that happened in Ukraine in the early 1930s. And it spent a lot of time talking about the problems with it, but it still acknowledged that all of those numbers I read were true. The Soviet Union did wipe out illiteracy. The Soviet Union did dramatically and rapidly industrialize. The Soviet Union did have the world's largest power plants and the world's largest steel mills. The Soviet Union did lift millions of people up from poverty. The Soviet Union did create modern, abundant housing for all of these statistics that I had read in The Revolution Betrayed. They were all true. The Soviet Union had astounding economic achievements. A hemp car. I see your super chat. The National Security Archives. Cutting and pasting it. You're on the list. The Soviet Union had indeed had huge economic achievements. And what I had been told was a lie. And I checked other sources. And everywhere I checked, what I had been told about communism was bullshit. The Soviet Union did not fail. It did not have utter economic failure. It had quite the opposite. And this was an undeniable fact. The rapid industrialization, the wiping out of illiteracy, the full electrification, the construction of a modern farming system, the construction of modern power plants, the construction of the world's largest steel industry, the construction of the world's largest oil output industry at that point, all of that was actually true. And that what I was told over and over and over again about the Soviet Union, that never had communism ever worked anywhere. It just fails. It just doesn't work. That was a lie. And all you had to do all that you ever had to do to see that that was a lie was just look at basic economic data. That what everyone in the United States believed about communism and said about communism all the time, communism failed, communism just failed, that was not true. That was a lie. It was flat out in contradiction with reality. And that was a fact that I could not escape. Discovering that American society and the entire identity of Americans and the entire understanding that Americans have of the Cold War, the entire understanding that Americans have of their economic system is premised on a big, obvious lie. That was something that I couldn't escape. I couldn't forget. I couldn't unlearn it. And nothing that the imperialists say, nothing that I was told about Stalin's gulags or prison camps or about this or that, nothing could change that fact. Once I realized how badly I had been lied to and how much what everybody thought they knew about communism was not true and was obviously not true, and how people were terrified of acknowledging that was a big moment for me. And that is what started me on this journey. That's what forced me to awaken. That's what forced me to ask questions, to explore this reality, to dig into the truth. Because once you become aware of something like that, once you become aware that so much distortion is out there, it's very hard to unlearn it. It's very hard to forget. And what they were telling us about the Soviet Union was not true. And what they were telling us about communism in general was not true. Communists never advocated the equality of wages. It wasn't that everyone gets paid the same wage. That was just made up. I learned that in school year after year. I learned that, but it wasn't true. It was a lie. So much of what I had been told about communism was just a complete and utter lie. Just a complete and utter lie. And that was an inescapable reality. Now, I've also talked about how I visited Quito, Ecuador, when I was 12 years old. My father had a side job leading nature tours in the Galapagos Island. So one summer, I went with my dad to Quito, Ecuador, and to the Galapagos Islands. That was in the year of 1999. And in 1999, Ecuador was in the middle of a man-made famine. I didn't know this at the time, but Ecuador had been forced by the World Bank and the IMF to give up its currency, to privatize its oil industry, to sell off its state assets, and it had been economically devastated. And if you combined that with the crash on the Asian markets, which was a very dramatic event that happened in the 1990s, late 1990s. And if you combine that with some weather anomalies that back then they called El Nino, right? Which, I mean, now I think they would probably just say it was climate change, but they called it El Nino. There was a mass episode of malnutrition in Ecuador. Hundreds of thousands of people died or fled the country. Died from malnutrition and fled the country. Well, I went to Ecuador with my father, and I remember getting off the airplane and seeing crowds of desperately poor, starving, hungry people. And these were people from the countryside of Ecuador who had lost their land and had piled into the city and were hungry and poor and desperate. And I saw this huge amount of poverty, and it was just, I was just like blown away. Very good point. I was just utterly blown away. Utterly blown away by what I was seeing. The explanation I was given for why all these people were starving was because they don't start their business meetings on time. That's what I was told. That in America, we start our business meetings right on time, but Latin America, it's hot. It's hot weather and people are lazy and they start their meeting an hour late or 2 hours late, and they're just not efficient like we Americans are. That's why they're starving. That's why they're poor. That's what I was told. Well, that was not the case. I also got to walk the picket lines with my mom. She was a librarian. And public library she worked at, they didn't have proper security. There were men coming into the library, sexually harassing the women, stealing things, doing various things. The librarians wanted security guards for their protection. And Stark County, Ohio, would not provide this security. So the librarians went on strike. And so I walked the picket lines with my mom. I carried a little picket sign, and my mom and 10 or 12 librarians stood out in front of the library with picket signs. And there were company goons, security guards, making sure they didn't step onto the library property while they did it. And I had the experience of walking the picket lines with my mother and attending some labor union rallies in Canton, Ohio with my mother when I was a child. I learned what a labor union was. I learned what strikes were. A lot of people now don't even know what a labor union is. I'm being serious. I have met a number of people who don't know what a union is. I have to explain to them. Well, I say, but when people go on strike and they go, oh, okay, yeah. And I said, well, the group of the workers who go on strike, that's a union. People say, oh, used to be everybody knew what a union was. Labor consciousness used to be a big part of what it meant to live in this country. Truck drivers, steel workers, they had union consciousness. But a lot of people now in the United States don't know what a union is. Well, I learned what a union was. And at a young age, I learned what a union was. I learned about the labor movement. My parents loved folk music. They loved, Pete Seeger, Woody Guthrie. They were always taking me and my brother, and we would always be at some folk music concert. There's a lot of, I don't know if they have this anymore, but there used to be a lot of small unknown folk singers, right? Who were not big names. They're not famous, but they would just go around and play little concerts here, little concerts there. I guess nowadays everything's online. Everyone gets their music online, so it's not like that. But it used to be that I remember many times sitting in the audience, sitting on folding chairs someplace with my parents, and we'd all be, there'd be 30, 40, 50 people there, and we'd all be singing, Michael, row the boat ashore. Hallelujah. We'd be singing. It was just folk music, right? That was just a thing, right? It still is, right? I assume it still is, right? I assume if I had the time, I could probably find the right, bar to go in New York City and listen to folk music or whatever. But I remember that. I would sit in the audience with my parents, and I remember distinctly one time I was sitting in the audience. There was a very large man, very fat man, and he was playing the guitar, and he played a song, which is an anti-religious song by Joe Hill called Pie in the Sky When You Die. Do folks know that song? It's a Joe Hill song, right? Joe Hill was the leader of the Wobblies. I had no idea that was a communist song, right? It's, long-haired preachers come out every night, try to tell you what's wrong and what's right. And it's kind of an anti-religious song. And the last verse, The last verse is saying that, that you need to overthrow the capitalist bosses, right? What is the last verse? The last verse of Pie in the Sky When You Die, right? So it's right. So it's working folks of this country unite. We side by side for freedom will fight. And when the world and this wealth we have gained, to the bosses we'll sing this refrain. You will eat by and by when you've learned how to cook and how to fry. So I heard that and I thought the message of the song, because I had no socialist consciousness, I thought the message of the song was that rather than praying in order to get rich, one should work hard. That's what I thought the message of the song was, that rather than being religious and praying for God to help you, one should work hard. That's what I took from the song. And now, years later, I realized, oh, that song was a socialist revolutionary song. He was saying, you'll have pie in the sky when you die. And that was the bosses. After we overthrow them, they'll have to do some work for once. But I didn't understand that, because how would I understand that, right? You wouldn't understand that. You wouldn't understand these things. What else? I remember hearing another song. It was by a kind of a mildly well-known folk singer. And he was singing about, in the office, the home, and the factory, they will rise up and we shall rise. And I actually thought the song was about the end of the world. I thought it was about Armageddon. But I look back on that now and I realize that was a Marxist anthem. It was about the working class rising up against the capitalist bosses. I didn't know that. I had no way of knowing that. I look back on it now, I realize that song was about the workers rising up against the bosses. So as I got older, 9/11 happened. September 11th happened. And after 9/11, my little town turned into a 24-hour patriotic pro-military rally. I'm barely exaggerating there. I mean, one day we all had to put on clothes of a certain color, and we were a living flag. I remember that. We all had to stand, and the people wearing blue had to stand here, and the people wearing red had to stand here, and we lined up the whole school, and we were a living flag. Remember that. Another day, I mean, we were always having military this and military that. We had to make boxes of candy for the troops. I remember that. Every morning we'd have to, assemble these bags of candy and write, we adopted a battleship when the USA invaded Afghanistan, and we had to write like letters to the soldiers, thanking them for protecting our freedom as they fight Afghanistan. It was so ridiculous. It was so ridiculous. It was so utterly ridiculous. And I was just very alienated from that. I was not in support of the USA invading Iraq. I realized that Iraq was not responsible for 9/11. That Iraq being responsible for 9/11 was ridiculous. It was just absolutely ridiculous. And that, I was against the war in Iraq, and people were not happy with me for being against the war in Iraq. And that increased the level of alienation I was feeling. And in that atmosphere, having read about communism and having started researching about communist groups, I got more and more interested in communism. And I started investigating. I read Imperialism, the Highest Stage of Capitalism by Lenin, which was not an easy book to read. It was very hard to read. I first tried to read it. I couldn't read it. Remember, at one point I got What Is to Be Done by Vladimir Lenin. And I thought, I was reading the encyclopedia article about Vladimir Lenin. And the encyclopedia article said, and then Lenin wrote his masterpiece work, What Is to Be Done? And I thought, that sounds exciting. What is to be done? I thought it was an agitational pamphlet. He would say, what is to be done? Have a revolution, rise up. So I got What Is to Be Done. And I thought I was going to read an agitational, exciting piece of writing. And I opened it and I could not make heads or tails of it. I'm like, what the hell is this? And freedom of criticism and Raboche de Leo. And I'm just like, what the hell I couldn't make heads or tails of it. And I just, it just seemed like utter gobbledygook. And he's talking about freedom of criticism and terrorism and Raboche de Leo and the Friends of the People and the Narodnikai. And I was like, what the hell is this? But I started reading Imperialism, the Highest Stage of Capitalism. I learned a lot from that. And, I finally made my way through it and I started to get it. And I started looking for different communist groups to be involved with. The internet was a new thing. I found out about different communist groups. I remember when I found out there was a communist party in America, I was blown away. I assumed I was the only person. I assumed I was the only person who believed in communism because everyone I ever met said that communism had failed everywhere and all that. And I found out there was a communist party. I was blown away. I was just like blown away. I remember looking at the Communist Party USA website and just being blown away like, whoa, this is amazing. I couldn't believe that there was a communist party. And then I found this website that no longer exists called the Red Encyclopedia. And it had all the different communist groups about their history. And I was fascinated. I read about Trotskyites and Maoists and anarchists and social democrats. And I was blown away. It was all fascinating. It was this whole world I had never heard of. No one in my family was a communist. No one in my family was a socialist. I didn't go to, young pioneer summer camps when I was a kid. All of this was completely foreign to me. It was all completely foreign to me. And it just blew my mind reading about these different organizations. And I was like, whoa, this is fascinating, right? It was completely fascinating to read about. I started approaching different groups, trying to learn about them. And it was this interest. And I was always getting in trouble at school, right? Thanks, Gaia. I was always getting in trouble at school because I was arguing with people about communism. And I don't know. I remember at one point, I think my parents got a phone call when I was a freshman in high school because I said I admired Nat Turner. Nat Turner was the leader of a slave revolt. And I think my social studies teacher was very concerned that I admired Nat Turner, the leader of this slave revolt, because he was a murderer and he had killed white people, killed slave owners. And they were very worried that I was admiring this violent murderer named Nat Turner. And it was just unbelievable. But I was always getting in trouble and many times I had to explain to people that I wasn't a Nazi, that a communist and a Nazi are not the same thing. People would say to me, well, I heard that there was at Columbine, the kids who shot up the school, they were all communists. I'd be like, no, they were not communists. They were white supremacists. They were Nazis. That's different. The communists defeated the Nazis. And they're like, but isn't it the same thing? Isn't it like the same thing? It's like a dictatorship. I'm like, no, it wasn't. Many times I had to explain to people that Nazis and communists are not the same thing. That was a conversation I had to have with many, many people. But yeah, it was a wild time. It was a very, very wild time. But long story short, by the time I was in college, I was hanging out with different communist groups. And I was in different communist organizations. And that's where my heart was, I didn't even really want to go to college, honestly. My parents wanted me to go to college. I didn't want to go. I wanted to be a communist organizer. I just wanted to go be a communist. I wanted to get a job and join a communist group. That's what I wanted to do. I looked into different communist groups. I was active with different communist groups. Joined the Workers' World Party. I was in the Workers' World Party in college. I'd been with a Maoist group before that. But they weren't exactly the right group for me. I was in the Workers' World Party and, I was done with college and I was heavily involved in a lot of police brutality activism in Cleveland. There was a walkout at a high school, at Collinwood High School. I video recorded the police beating up Destiny and Deasia Bruno, two young women. I got them acquitted in juvenile court with my video. I went to court with a lot of police brutality victims, but, I had a lot of different jobs. I worked as a gas station attendant. I worked behind the counter at Speedway. And I ended up getting fired because I I was just very bad at it. I was just too spacey. I wasn't focused enough. And, I was struggling to get by, my family cut me off. They basically told me they didn't approve of what I was doing. They wanted me to go back to college. They wanted me to, get my life together, and they basically cut me off. I was on my own. There were times I went without food. I remember one week I got like a bag of rice. It was a bag of rice, and I boiled the rice, and I put it in a what do you call it? Like a tub. And I put it in this tub, and I put like a stick of butter in there with it. It was like a big tub, and that was all I ate for like 5 days. I ate nothing but that rice with the butter in it for 5 days. I was very hungry. And I remember I finally got some money together, or something happened, and I went and ate after that week of eating the rice. And I was just so excited to finally eat some food. And I put the food into my mouth, but I had not eaten very much the week before. And so I immediately just vomited. And that's what happens if you don't eat for a while and then you eat again and you eat like too fast, you vomit. And that was a painful experience. And I remember vomiting. I used to sell my blood plasma. I remember that. I used to go to the plasma clinic in Cleveland, and I used to sell my blood plasma, right? You could do twice a week, I think, and they would give you like $35 the first time and $50 the second time. I used to sell my blood plasma in Cleveland. And, I was out of college. I was a young person trying to get by. So, that's one thing. But I remember when I was in Cleveland, I would be on the west side of Cleveland selling my blood plasma. And I remember there would be like whole families there. There'd be moms with kids. And they'd be watching each other's kids while the moms went and sold their blood plasma so they could feed their kids. It was heartbreaking to watch. One day the freezer broke. One day there was a whole line of people there to sell their blood plasma, and the freezer broke. And there'd be people who'd been waiting there for 2.5 hours to sell their blood plasma to get some money. And they'd been waiting, and then the freezer broke. And there was almost a riot. They had to have the police come and announce it, and the police were there. Like, they announced that they're not buying any plasma. And there was almost a riot at the plasma clinic that day. It was wild. I mean, because people had been waiting there all day to sell their blood plasma. And that was wild. That was a wild, wild experience. And I think, it was funny. I was on the west side of Cleveland. In Cleveland, they have an area they call Steel Yards Common. Have you ever heard of this? It's like in downtown Cleveland. And it's really, we talked about it a lot in the party because, this book had just been published, which, I mean, let bygones be bygones. It's still a good book about overproduction stuff, low-wage capitalism, by Fred Goldstein. This book had just been published. And in downtown Cleveland, if you go down by the river in Cleveland, there was a big steel mill there, huge steel mill that employed thousands of people to make steel. Well, it closed down, but they replaced it with a giant Walmart. And the place where the giant Walmart has been built, the city of Cleveland paid for it, and they built a special like bus route to take people there and stuff. And there's a giant Walmart and Sam's Club, and it's all these low wage retail employers that are on the rubble of the steel mill, and they call this area, they call it Steel Yards Common. That's what they call it, Steel Yards Common. And it's kind of ironic because there used to be good paying industrial jobs and steel mills there. And now there's no more steel mills. And so they've built this low wage shopping center with union busting Walmart and Sam's Club. And it's called Steel Yards Common. I remember we talked about that in the party because that was just a symbol of what was happening. That was capitalism in decay. That's what we were looking at. I used to sell newspapers. I would go to Cleveland State University and stand there and try to sell newspapers. And, I would, I don't know, I would do different things. There was like a pizza place. Near Cleveland State University, and I could get pizza, like a slice of pizza there for very cheap. And so I would sell newspapers to the students. I would sell communist newspapers, take some of the money, 10, 15 bucks or whatever, and eat a couple slices of pizza before I went home. And I read like crazy during these years. I studied everything. I studied. And what was interesting was like, this is when I really learned the most out of any time in my young life, right? Because I had decided I was in this. I had decided that I was a communist, right? And I'd lost family connection over it. And I'd lost friendships and relationships. And I decided, you know what? This is it. This is what I've given myself. I'm all in, right? I'm a communist. I'm a communist now, and it's like, I've come this far. I've come this far, and there's no turning back now. So I'm going to make this communism thing work because this is all I got. This is who I am. I've chosen this. This has become who I am, and this is it. So I started studying communist literature like crazy. It was weird. I was barely surviving. I was barely eating, and I was living in Cleveland, and I can't even tell you about some of the shit I was involved with. I mean, I was lumping at that point in my life. I was lumping. I guess you could say I was lumping. Let me put it that way. I was barely surviving. But I was reading so much. And I read The History of the Three Internationals by William Z. Foster. And I read Black Radical by Nelson Peary. And I read The Future is Up to Us by Nelson Peary. And I read so much. I read many, many pieces. And I was just studying this stuff to try and understand it. And I became very interested in the history of the Communist Party of the United States because they had been successful. I basically came to the conclusion during these years, the only two communist groups that ever really mattered in American history were, one, the Communist Party USA until McCarthyism, and two, the Black Panthers. Those were the only communist groups that ever really made a difference in American history. All the other ones, I mean, I guess maybe before the First World War, you can talk about the Wobblies and Eugene Debs. We're talking about Marxism, Leninism, communist organizations. The only two communist groups that have ever made a difference have been the Communist Party USA before McCarthyism and the Black Panthers. And all the other ones, I mean, you can't really learn much from them. I mean, they did something right here, they did something right there, but they're not really relevant. The Communist Party in the 1930s was a really big deal. And the Black Panther parties in the late 60s and early 70s, they were a really big deal. But all the other communist groups in America, they don't matter. They don't matter. They just, they're just, they sell newspapers. They might have organized a good protest at one point, got a few 100,000 people to a protest. They may have gotten one person elected one place at some point. But other than that, they don't really matter. And I'm just being blatantly honest with you, right? The only two communist organizations that are really worth studying and you really can learn anything from are the Communist Party USA in the 1930s and the Black Panther Party. And I studied both of those organizations excessively. I read We Want Freedom, A Life in the Black Panther Party by Mumia Abu-Jamal, which is a great book. An extensive academic study of the Black Panthers mixed in with his own experiences as a revolutionary organizer. It's very fascinating. You really should read We Want Freedom by Mumia Abu-Jamal. That's a really great book. And I studied all these organizations, and I studied different communist groups. Oh, wow. Yeah. And I remember I started to come to conclusions that were contrary to what I was being told. I was told that what we needed was class independence. Class independence, right? We needed the working class to not be aligned with the Democrats or the Republicans, but to have their own party. We needed the working class to be independent, political independence for the working class. That's what I was told. But as I read the history of the three internationals, as I read the history of the labor movement, I read Labor's Untold Story, Labor's Giant Step. I read the Teamster series by the Trotskyite Farrell Dobbs, the leader of the Teamsters Union in the 1930s. Farrell Dobbs. I read Teamster Rebellion, Teamster Power, Teamster Bureaucracy. It's a 4-part series of books about the Teamsters Union. I read all of those books. And the more I studied the history of the labor movement and the civil rights movement, and the more I read about this, the more I realized that every revolution that has ever happened has started with a division in the ruling class. The Chinese Revolution started with a division in the ruling class. The Russian Revolution started with a division in the ruling class. And that every revolution that has ever happened has actually started with a division in the ruling class. And that leads to the masses becoming politicized. The capitalists mobilize the workers to fight the other capitalists. And then that leads to the working class coming into motion and taking power. And the civil rights movement, was largely, there had been a black freedom struggle, like since the moment black people were brought here in chains. But the 1950s Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. movement started because of a division in the ruling class. And that divisions in the ruling class were the basis of creating the opening through which revolutionary movements can break out. I remember discovering that and telling that to my comrades in the Workers' World Party. They thought that was heresy. They said, no. We don't want to be aligned with any capitalists. We want class unity, working class got to break away from the, But the more I studied this history, the more it became very apparent to me that revolutions begin with divisions in the ruling class. Remember having these conversations with people and just being unsatisfied with the answers I was getting a lot. And long story short, thank God I ended up moving to New York City. I thought I was going to New York City for a month. It's kind of ironic, but I was struggling to get by. I was barely eating. I was desperate. And a woman in the Workers' World Party asked me to come to New York City for a month to help her put out some new pamphlets. And so they got funding together. They arranged for me to come to New York City for a month. And so I came to New York City for a month, and I helped them lay out the pamphlets on the computer, and I helped around the office, and they saw that I could do the work. And so then they talked to me about staying in New York City. So I did. And then almost immediately after I moved to New York City, I was like, all of a sudden they didn't want me around anymore. The woman who ran the office decided I was too bookish. I knew too much about Marxism. I had tried to put a Lenin book on a literature table. And she said, well, young people aren't interested in Lenin. They don't want to hear about Lenin, And so suddenly, even though I'd moved to New York, they were telling me I had to go find, a job. I couldn't work for them anymore because the people who ran the office didn't like me. So I went and got a job at an insurance company. And I worked at an insurance firm. And they hired me because they thought I was an Orthodox Jew. Because I had long hair and a beard at the time. And they thought I was an Orthodox Jew because I had my long curly hair and my beard, and I wore like a button-down shirt. And so I went and applied for the job, and I had telemarketing experience because I'd been a telemarketer when I was in college. And, they hired me to work at this insurance firm that was run by Orthodox Jews. And so I worked at this insurance firm. And I worked at the insurance firm, and then I would go to party meetings every night practically, and I remember how angry I would get at them. I would get very angry with them because, I had to be at work, by 8:30 a.m. every morning. And I would go from Brooklyn, where my insurance company was. I'd get off work at, 5:36. And I would go to their office in Manhattan for a meeting that was supposed to start at 8 or 7:30. And I would wait for an hour before they would actually start the meeting. And I'd be thinking I've got laundry to do tonight. And I've got to go all the way back to Brooklyn or Queens. I lived in Queens at that point. I've got to go all the way back. Can we just get the meeting going? But these were retired folks or, folks who didn't have jobs. And, and I remember my time was very valuable. And that's a very working class thing. There's a lot of writing about how being on time is working class, because working class people's time is very valuable. If you're a student, you can just hang out and chill. If you're retired, you can just hang out and chill. But if you are working a 9-to-5 job, your time is very valuable. And I was very frustrated. I would get very frustrated with them because I would get there for the I think we had what was called the local coordinating committee of the party. And I would be on the local coordinating committee, and I'd be there for the weekly meeting. And it would be supposed to start at 7 or 7:30, and it would be at 8:30, and they hadn't started yet. And I'm looking at my clock because I got shit to do, and I got to get up the next morning. I remember that. It was a very working class, kind of experience. Occupy Wall Street started. And I was working at the insurance firm. So every day after work, I would go to Occupy Wall Street and sell the communist newspaper. We'd have a literature table for the Workers' World newspaper. On the weekends, I went to Occupy Wall Street. It was an experience. It was definitely an experience for me. I was part of the Occupy Wall Street protests, got arrested, ran through the streets, Those were the days, right? I had long hair and my beard, and I was doing Occupy Wall Street. I started doing a lot of interviews for Press TV because I was an Occupy Wall Street activist who was anti-imperialist, who stood with Iran against the U.S. imperialists. I took anti-imperialist positions, and because of that, I was appearing on Press TV. I was appearing on RT, yeah, I mean, it's all very wild, and I could continue, but I just want to let you all know where I came from. And I used to tell these stories on these live streams a lot, but I've kind of gotten away from that, right? One thing led to another, and now we have the Center for Political Innovation, and now we have our own events and our own conferences around the country. We go to international communist gatherings. We publish books. We're so important. The Communist Party has published a big, long hit piece about us on their website. Newsweek has written about us. We are a cutting edge communist organization. We are leading the fight. We're doing what no other communist group will do, what they abandoned: the struggle for working class power, the struggle for anti-imperialism, the struggle to stand in solidarity with Russia and China and Iran and Venezuela and all the countries that have broken out of the domination of Western capitalism. We're doing it. All right? The Workers' World Party went woke and went broke. The Communist Party has deteriorated into a Joe Biden fundraising, organization, a Joe Biden volunteer organization. But the Center for Political Innovation is doing it. We're having rallies, peace with Russia, peace with China. We're having events around the country. We're doing it. We're doing it. And it's really an honor to do what we've done. And we've come a long way. And I've been to a number of countries now, written a number of books, met a number of people, found people that I can work with, and a lot of great things have happened. A lot of really, really great things have happened. There's been hardships, there's been setbacks, but that happens, right? I mean, that's not something that we shouldn't expect, right? This isn't easy work, right? Doing this, you put yourself on the line, you put yourself in danger. It's not an easy thing to do, but it's something that you do because you believe in this, because you're willing to make sacrifices, because this is where your heart is, because you know that you're right. Anna Louise Strong, one of my favorite writers, Anna Louise Strong, a revolutionary writer from the Pacific Northwest, a feminist, a communist journalist who lived in the Soviet Union. She used to talk about being right in your soul, right? Knowing deep down that what you are doing is right, what you're on the correct side of history, you're standing up for justice. And that some of us just have a deep, compelling desire to be right in our souls. And we know that capitalism and imperialism is the enemy of humanity, and we won't back down. We have a desire to be right in our souls. And I've rediscovered my faith. I'm a Christian, and I see Christianity and communism as walking hand in hand, just like the Venezuelans do, just like the Nicaraguans do, just like the Cubans, many Cubans do now. And I've been to world communist gatherings. I'm where the global communist movement is at. I'm not where the wokes are. I'm where the global communist movement is at. There's a movement now that's taken power in Venezuela. It's taken power in Donetsk and Lugansk. It's taken power in Nicaragua. It's taken power in many different corners of the world. Socialism with Chinese characteristics, and because that's the movement I'm loyal to. I'm loyal to the anti-imperialist revolutionary movement of our time, and that is where my loyalty lies. And that's why I'm here. And that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. And if you want to do it with me, you're more than welcome to. We're not breaking the law. We're not doing anything illegal. And we don't even advocate a violent revolution. We advocate a peaceful transition to socialism. But we know the capitalist bosses may not allow that to happen. And if the capitalist bosses won't allow a peaceful transition to socialism, and they're moving to violently suppress people and violate their democratic rights, then the working class has the right to self-defense. There's nothing more American than self-defense. And there may come a time where the working class has to defend itself against the ruling class. But we would prefer that not happen. We'd prefer to have a peaceful and democratic transition to socialism within the existing democratic structures. That's what we would prefer. And that's an important point to make, right? And people don't understand this point. People think advocating left adventurism or terrorism is revolutionary. It is not. Right? Working class people don't want civil war. Working class people don't want violence in their communities. It may come to such a thing, but we would prefer it doesn't. We want a peaceful transition to socialism. So there you go. All right. Well, I'm going to show this clip about the Center for Political Innovation. And then from there, we can do our roll call, start answering super chats. Just a great late night conversation. Here we go.
CPI a year or so ago, the 4-point program made a lot of sense. Mass mobilization to rebuild the country, public control of banking, public ownership of natural resources, economic bill of rights by Roosevelt. You don't need to be a communist to agree to them.
The protest was held in Times Square in New York City, and Nicolas Maduro, the president of Venezuela, mentioned it in a speech several hours after it happened.
Hoy ya en Estados Unidos hubo la primera marcha, la primera movilización en Nueva York. Allá.
I'm speaking on behalf of the Center for Political Innovation. I was sent here on behalf of Caleb Maupin.
The March 2022 conference featured a number of prominent social media personalities and was packed full of people. The website trutherfiction.com had to put up a page clarifying that the anti-imperialist gathering featuring the Soviet flag, the US flag, and the flag of the Donetsk People's Republic was indeed real and not an internet hoax. It's our own edition of the Green Book by Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi. The CPI edition is the top-selling and top-rated version of the book on Amazon, and over 2,000 copies have been sold or distributed. CPI published the book Kamala Harris and the Future of America, an investigation into the woman who became the U.S. Vice President, which included her background and psychological profile. The book was widely reviewed in not only U.S. publications, but in print magazines in the UK and India. One of the main organizations that has worked against the Center for Political Innovation is the Communist Party USA. Ironically, CPI largely does the kind of educational work that the Communist Party fails to do. It is a well-documented historical fact that the Communist Party USA has been under the complete control of the FBI since at least 1958, if not earlier. Boris Childs, the top FBI informant inside the Communist Party National Board, received the Presidential Medal of Freedom for his work controlling the Communist Party and using it to feed disinformation to the Soviet Union. CPI maintains that it is necessary to reinvent socialism and pull away from these forces. As Lenin said, we seek to go lower and deeper to the real masses. One point must also be made on behalf of the board of directors, and this is that Caleb Maupin is our ideological leader. CPI is the result of Caleb Maupin's vision for building an organization, and we recognize his unique approach to building 21st century socialism. Though CPI is much more than any one personality, we don't take for granted his pioneering efforts in understanding and applying Marxism, Leninism, anti-imperialism, and even Christianity. His place as our ideological leader and visionary shouldn't be understated, and we are proud that he has this place in our organization. Thanks, Caleb. If you feel you have a contribution to make, please join our organization. We will do our best to connect you immediately and put you to work. We want you to have a voice, and we want to empower you.
All righty. So, yeah, that was just a video, and we would like you to join the Center for Political Innovation. We're having our national convention out in Portland, December 2nd. So I would like to have you there. I'd like you to be part of it. You know, we're going to have a lot of people out there. We're doing a lot of outreach to build for that conference, etc. We just had a great meeting today for the CPI. So our organization is marching forward, and we'd love to have you. I hope you consider joining the Center for Political Innovation. We need new members. We've got 111 members right now, 111. So if you become 112, that'll be good luck as well. So why don't we do our roll call? I do see that there is a another Rockfin question from Hempcar. So I've got that on the Rockfin. But why don't we do our roll call? Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. I will call you all out as I see you. I'm looking at the Rumble. Names and locations. I'm looking at the Rockfin. Names and locations. And I'm looking at the YouTube. Names and locations. Who's with us? Limassol in Cyprus. That's the first time that we've had someone from Cyprus. That is really cool. One of those streams, can you feature some of President Xi's quotes about the BRICS? Sure, I can do that. Good evening from Los Angeles, says Joe Tuggus. Welcome, Joe. Gabby in Chicago, who did some great messages, just did a great message about being a single mother and the hardships. And you know, she does great messages for our YouTube channel for the CPI morning messages. Tyler in Missouri, Jenny in Cincinnati, John, or Patrick in Maine, John Whitty in Houston, Chester in England, Patch in Arizona, Heidi in Edinburgh, Scotland, Chris in Salt Lake City, Zach from Seattle, David in Rochester, New York, Peace in California, Mitchell Sparks in Pittsburgh. Welcome, welcome. Red Star over Chattanooga, Steve Choate. Steve Choate is with us. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Bruce Monroe in Manila, right? Enoch in Australia, Peter in Paraguay, Rice in Adelaide, Australia, West Virginia, Sam Price, Linwood, California, Micah in Las Vegas, Jamie in St. Paul, Mariah in North Carolina. Thanks for the story. Poverty is no joke. Well, you know, compared to what a lot of people, I'm fine. Colin in Greensboro, Rice from Adelaide, Australia, Springfield, Massachusetts, Shannon in Florida, Jamie in St. Paul, Colin in Greensboro. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm looking at the Rockfin. We got Jamie Turner in Boise, Idaho. Welcome, Jamie. We got Garcia Gonzalo in Argentina. We got David Fox in Bendigo, Australia. We got Bob Troy in New York. Bob Troy, welcome, Bob. Dave in Scoggitt County. Gabby is real. Yes, she is. We love Gabby. We love all our members. You know, Tyler's amazing. And I mean, I could sit here and name every member. Noah. And, oh man, I could just name every member. And we got so many amazing people in our organization. So many amazing people. Eric in Holland. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Names and locations. Call you out as I see you. Christopher in Texas. Welcome. Welcome, welcome. Names and locations. Names and locations. Names and locations. Join the Center for Political Innovation. Cumberland Mountain number 9. Join the CPI. We need new members every day. We need new members. So, Edelweiss Pirates in central Wisconsin. Ellie in Chicago is on Rockfin. Shout out to you, Ellie. Ellie's also a CPI member, does great work in Chicago. So I haven't heard this before. I wanted to play a song from the Irish freedom struggle, one of a popular Irish freedom song, and it's called The Patriots Game. And I was looking for a version of it. You can't play like, one of the widely recorded versions or they'll hit you. This is a version I've never heard before by an Irish singer. So I'm going to put it on. We'll see if it's any good. And if it is, we'll listen to it. So I've been doing music. I've always liked The Patriots Game. And I thought I put that on the desktop, and it should be on the desktop. So why is it not coming up? Here it is. The Patriots Game. All right, here we go. This is a version I have not heard before. I love this song. I haven't heard this version. There we go.
Come all ye young rebels, come this will I sing. For love one's country is a terrible thing. It banishes fear with the speed of a flame, and makes us all part of the patriot game. My name is O'Hanlon, I've just turned 16. My home is in Mullen, that's where I was weak. And I learned all my lifetime cruel England's to blame. So now I'm a part of the patriot game. This Ireland of ours has too long been half free. 6 counties lie under Jumbo's tyranny, but still De Valera is greatly to blame for shirking his part in the patriot game. They told me how Conley was shot in the chair. His wounds from the battles of Bloody and Bare, his fine body twisted, all battered and lame. It soon made me part of the patriot game. It's nearly 2 years since I wandered away with the local battalion of the boat IRA. I read of our heroes, I wanted to say, to play out my part in the patriot game. And now as I lie here, my body all holds, and I think of those traitors who bargained and sold, and I wish that my rifle had given the same to those Quislings who sold out the patriot game, to those traitors who sold out our patriot game.
Well, that was okay. I'm going to do one more version of the song. It's a favorite Irish freedom song by Dominic Bahan that I really like, narrating the story of the young boy who joins the IRA and feels betrayed by the treaty, the Irish Free State. I'm gonna put on another version of the song. I think, see if it's any better. Again, I can't play the big version on here, or they'll hit me. They'll hit this. They'll hit this streams. This is another version of it. So we'll see if this one's any better. That was okay, but we'll see about this one.
All you young rebels, and listen as I sing, for the love of one's country is a terrible thing. It banishes fear with the speed of a flame, and it makes us all part of Patriot game. My name is O'Hanlon, and I'm just gone 16. My home is in Monaghan, where I was weaned. I learned all my life cruel England's to blame. So I'm a part of the Patriot game. It's barely 2 years since I've wandered away with a local battalion of the bold IRA. I'd read of our heroes, and I wanted the same, to play up my part in the Patriot game. They told me how Conley had been shot in the chair, his wounds from the fighting all bleeding and bare, his fine body twisted, all battered and lame. Oh, they soon made me part of the Patriot game. They don't mind at all down police. They're lackeys of war, never guardians of peace, and yet at deserters I'm never letting. Those cowards who sold out the Patriot game. Ireland of ours has for long been a free. 6 counties are under John Bull's tyranny, and still the Valera is greatly to blame for shirking his part in game. So now as I lie here, my body all holds, I think on those traitors who bargained and sold. I wish that my rifle had given the same for those quizzling those who sold out patriot game.
John, I don't know if I can play that. I think that song's by David Rovix, and I think it might be, but I'll look into that one. I'll look for that one and see if I can play it in a way that won't cause a problem. But one thing that I would like to do, we just played Patriots game, which is kind of a sad song. So I figured I would play a more lively Irish freedom song. This is one that's in Gaelic, and it's it's kind of like a song about like welcoming home the heroes from battle. It's in Gaelic, and I guess this is the Monsieur Jack guy that I've always really liked, and I guess this is his version of it, which I haven't heard before. I didn't know he had recorded this song, so let's see how that goes. Wow. Okay. Now, I guess I think I can do this since we had a special request. And I did see your super chat, Tyler. You're on the list. I think we can do this. This is the great David Rovix performing his own composition, the St. Patrick's Battalion.
So, it was there's a story that was that lots of you are probably aware of, but it was sort of purposefully forgotten in the U.S. and still is. When all the refugees came from Ireland, which they called immigrants, in the 1840s, they were, if they were young men, they were handed a uniform and a gun, and told to go kill other Catholics, and who happened to be Mexican, and they got down there and they didn't like what they saw, and thousands of them deserted from the army and became Mexicans themselves. But 202 of them, including a bunch of Germans and Poles and a couple of folks from Wales, took desertion a step further. My name is John Riley. I'll have your ear open. I left my dear home in Ireland. It was death, starvation, or exile. When I got to America, it was my duty to go. Enter the army and slog across Texas to join in the war against Mexico. And it was there in the pueblos and hillsides that I saw the mistake I had made. Part of a conquering army with the morals of a bayonet blade. And there amidst all these poor dying Catholics, screaming children, the burning stench of it all, myself and 200 Irishmen decided to rise to the call. From Dublin City to San Diego, we witnessed freedom denied. So we formed the St. Patrick Battalion and we fought on the Mexican side. We formed the St. Patrick Battalion and we fought on the Mexican side. Lovely. We marched neath the green flag of St. Patrick, emblazoned with Erin Golgra, bright with the harp and the shamrock and Libertad para Republica. Just 50 years after Wolfe Tone, 5,000 miles away, the Yanks called us a legion of strangers, and they can talk as they may. But from Dublin City to San Diego, we witnessed freedom denied. So we formed the St. Patrick Battalion, and we fought on the Mexican side. We formed the St. Patrick Battalion, and we fought on the Mexican side. We fought them in Matamoros, where their volunteers were raping the nuns. In Monterrey and Cerro Gordo, we fought on as Ireland's sons. We were the red-headed fire for freedom amidst these brown-skinned women and men. Side by side, we fought against tyranny, and I dare say we'd do it again. From Dublin City to San Diego, we witnessed freedom denied. So we formed the St. Patrick Battalion, and we fought on the Mexican side. We formed the St. Patrick Battalion, and we fought on the Mexican side. Churubusco was the last. Overwhelmed by the cannons from Boston, We fell after each mortar blast. Most of us died on that hillside at the service of the Mexican state. So far from our occupied homeland, we were heroes and victims of fate. From Dublin City to San Diego, we witnessed freedom denied. So we formed the St. Patrick Battalion and we fought on the Mexican side. From Dublin City to San Diego, we witnessed freedom denied. So we formed the St. Patrick Battalion and we fought on the Mexican side. We formed the St. Patrick Battalion and we fought on the Mexican side.
All righty. Very good. Wow. Well, we had some great Irish music tonight. So now I think I'm going to start answering people's questions, right? And if you got more questions, keep them rolling in. So I will do the Rumble rant first. I got one Rumble rant first. And that's two. We got two Rumble rants. So the first one we'll do, we got one from Mariah and the other from Unknown. So we're gonna do both of them. We'll do the Rumble rants first. So Mariah says, what are your thoughts on some of the anomalies that took place in Maui? Water was turned off, blockades stopped people from escaping, aid hasn't been forthcoming. What's going on? Well, look, I am utterly blown away by the way that they have talked. And Ellie, there's Rockfin tips coming in now. And we'll get to those later, but we're doing the Rumble rants first, and then we'll do the Rockfin tips. And thank you, Ellie. You've been heard. The main thing to focus on about what's going on in Maui, the main thing to focus on is that, one, the power grid that was faulty. It was sparks from the power grid that lit the fire. Number two, the alarm system that was supposed to let them know the wildfire was coming did not sound. People got notifications on their phones, but they did not hear the alarm system. So this is not an argument for degrowth. This is an argument for having up-to-date alarm systems and having the power grid not crumbling and falling apart. But the satanic Democrats, Kamala Harris, has made it about climate change. What the hell? There's been wildfires in Maui for centuries. Since the beginning of time, they've had wildfires there. The wildfires were not caused by climate change. Wildfires happen in Maui. But this one was sparked by a crumbling power plant. It was sparked by, and it was exacerbated by the failure of the alarm system. The Democrats are so determined to degrow us and make us poorer. They will never miss an opportunity to say, oh, the problem is that we're consuming too much. We're having too many children. We're using too much electricity. We're breathing too much. Oh, our CO2, it's destroying Mother Earth. The satanic degrowth agenda of these people, they just can't turn it off for one goddamn minute. The fire was not caused by climate change. It was caused by the failure of the electrical system. It was caused by the failure of the water system. They turned off the water. It was caused by the failure of the alarm system. But they don't want to talk about any of that because that would mean we need to build more power grids that are better. That would mean we need to build more water irrigation systems that are better. That would mean we need to build better alarm systems. But climate change, if it's caused by climate change, then the answer is we all just have to be poorer. Oh, we all just need to be poorer. And it's infuriating. It's absolutely infuriating. They cannot turn off their satanic Malthusian agenda for one goddamn minute. And it is absolutely infuriating. Absolutely infuriating. And then they put in the mystical native stuff. I mean, it's like I respect the autonomy of indigenous groups. I respect their but it's like the issue The issue is shoddy, out-of-date infrastructure, not too much infrastructure, not too much development. And it's absolutely infuriating to hear them say this. They are so determined to degrow us. And they never miss an opportunity to push their degrowth satanic agenda. And it drives me up the wall. So that's my thoughts on that, Mariah. Next super chat or Rumble rant comes from Anoan 2018. He said, Ho Chi Minh made a poem about eating bamboo soup daily while living in a cave during his campaign. Thoughts on communism and food? Look, my friend, let's just be clear on something, right? Communists don't worship poverty. Poverty is anti-communist. To be rich is glorious. The goal of communism is to create a society where there is so much wealth and so much abundance that no one feels a need to hoard anything, that everyone can just take what they need and do what they feel like doing, from each according to his own ability, to each according to his needs. Oh, wasn't aware of this. You're on the list, John. From each according to his own ability, to each according to his needs. That is the goal, and that requires vast abundance. And so if Ho Chi Minh had to live in a cave during a war and eat rice, we don't think that's beautiful. It's beautiful that he made that sacrifice. It's beautiful that he endured that poverty to fight to free his homeland, and we admire that. But we're not simple life people. We're not liberals. We're not trying to get people unattached to their material possessions, back to nature. That's not what we're about. Communism is all about development and progress. And I just want to be clear on that. I want to be clear on that, right? I want to be absolutely clear on that. So there you go. So now to the Rockfin questions that came in. Hempcar says, the National Security Archive said the number one issue the USSR and the USA discussed during the Cold War was weaponization. 180 nations versus the U.S. wanted a prevention of a space arms race. I heard this is a taboo topic. Should this be a hint that the U.S. empire doesn't want us to know? I have no idea what that means. Hempcar, I mean, the Space Force is stupid. Donald Trump started the Space Force, right? And the outer space military. I mean, that's stupid. So, there's that. Now, the next thing from Hempcar says, I heard Putin banned GMOs. That's true. And I know Mexico is trying to ban them. I know Russia hates Monsanto, right? They hate Monsanto and the agribusiness in the United States. They've been trying to crush Russia out of the agricultural markets. And Monsanto is an enemy of Russia and of economic development. It's an enemy of socialism in Latin America as well. So I don't know exactly the reason for banning GMOs in Russia, but I know that Monsanto is no friend to Russia, and that they, because of sanctions, et cetera, they were forced to rebuild their farming system, and they've done an amazing job. I mean, the amazing rebuilding of their farming system. I mean, Putin has built a huge agricultural sector, huge amounts of development. So, there you go. I mean, yeah, I don't know specifically. And now Ellie Marino on Rockfin says, great song about the San Patricio Brigade in the 1990s in Mexico City. I met an old man who was a grandson of one of the San Patricio martyrs. He traveled there with his granddaughter from Ireland for an event commemorating them. And they are still widely remembered in Mexico, Ellie. I understand that in Mexico, people know them very well. You probably observed that. Here in the United States, they've done their best to just kind of pretend that never happened. But in Mexico, it is they're considered heroes. These Irish people who joined with the freedom struggle of the St. Patrick's battalion. So there you go. And that if you read Ulysses S. Grant, he wrote his autobiography. And Ulysses S. Grant, that was the first war he fought in. And he says it was the most unjust war ever fought. He says it was an awful war. And Ulysses S. Grant, his autobiography is very well written. He speaks with a level of candor and honesty almost like he's talking to you. The autobiography of Ulysses S. Grant is very to the point, and it's very revolutionary, very anti-slavery, very anti-war, even though he fought in the Mexican-American War. I actually learned a lot from Ulysses S. Grant. You know, he sent federal troops to fight the KKK. He defended Native Americans from settlers, was trying to hold back the settlers from going after the Native Americans on many occasions. Ulysses S. Grant, you know, he came out of the, sure, I can talk about that. Ulysses S. Grant came out of the struggle to defeat slavery, and he took office after the death of Lincoln, and then you had Johnson, and you know, he was president, and his legacy was that he had been the military leader of the U.S. military during the Civil War, and you know, he comes across as somebody. I mean, he was the leader of a revolutionary army. That was the Second American Revolution, and you know, I actually recommend one of the books I would recommend. Go and read the autobiography of Ulysses S. Grant. It's very easily written. I understand Mark Twain was kind of the ghostwriter. Mark Twain helped him write it, and that there are big gaps in it. He doesn't talk a lot about certain things, you know. But I don't know. I think it's a great book, and I really learned a lot. Ulysses S. Grant, I look up to him in a lot of ways. So, you know, he was an anti-slavery fighter, an anti-KKK fighter, a defender of Native people. It was before the USA moved into its stage of imperialism, coming out of the Second American Revolution and the defeat of the slaveholders. And I mean, I'm sure he did a lot of awful things as president. I mean, you know, to be the president of the United States, you know, but it's a great book. It's a great book. It's a great book. I would recommend the autobiography of Ulysses S. Grant. Very good book. And that talks about the Mexican-American War. All right. So now we've done the Rumble rants and the Rockfin tips. I'll keep checking if people do stuff on there. And now we'll start doing the super chats. Some Maoists say a peace movement is unnecessary. How can they say that? The world is on the brink of a nuclear war, right? The U.S. imperialists have already started a war in Ukraine, right? Russia held off as long as they could, but now there's an active war going on in Ukraine. They're trying to provoke a war in the South China Sea around with China and Taiwan and all of that. They're trying to provoke a war on the Korean Peninsula at this point by I mean, why would a peace movement be unnecessary? On what planet would a peace movement be unnecessary? You know, I mean, if there's ever been a moment, do they not realize the Russian Revolution started with a peace movement? What was the slogan of the Bolsheviks? Peace, land, and bread. The Bolsheviks took power because they made war against the war makers. Soldiers, turn your guns around, right? So what in the world would they be thinking when they say we don't need a peace movement? I mean, is it just you know, they don't want to get canceled for being pro-Putin. They want to fit in. That's like the dumbest thing I've ever heard. I don't even know, like, how in the world, right? That is really, really, really stupid for them to say that. You know, maybe they should go read Long Live Leninism, one of the main documents the Chinese Communist Party wrote to critique the Soviet Communist Party. And in that, they said the main duty is to combine the working class movement in the imperialist countries with the national liberation struggle in the colonized world. Maybe they should read one of Mao's final statements where he says, the danger of a new world war still exists and the people of all countries must get prepared, but revolution is the main trend in the world today. Or in that same statement where he says, the people of a small country can surely defeat aggression by a big country, but only if they dare to rise in struggle, only if they grasp in their hands the destiny of their country. This is a law of history, right? Maybe they should talk about that. Right? Maybe they should talk about that. I mean, I can't imagine anyone who is really familiar with Mao Zedong and his writing as a revolutionary anti-imperialist leader who broke China free from the imperialists. I cannot imagine anybody who understands Mao Zedong and his message and what the Chinese Communist Party was all about, not understanding that stopping World War III between Russia and China and the United States why that wouldn't be an urgent necessity of this hour, right? And if you're living in an imperialist country, it would be your duty to stand in solidarity and try to, it's beyond me how anyone can say that. But there's a lot of people on the internet who don't know anything about communism. And they just know this liberal cancel culture narrative where, oh, you must be a Naz. They think they're smart and they don't know anything. I don't know how one could call themselves a Maoist and understand anything about Mao and not think that right now we should be opposing the danger of a new imperialist war. A new imperialist world war is on the horizon. And how can anyone who calls themselves a Maoist, how can they not want us to do something to oppose that? That's outrageous. So here I will put on, right? You're getting a lot of songs tonight, folks. You're getting a lot of songs because that inspired me to put on, this is a song of Mao's words by Cardew. Right? This is Law of History, right? It's those words that I just quoted. The people of a small country can surely defeat aggression by a big country. I'm going to put those on the screen. So there we go. I'm going to put that song on. Law of History. So those are Mao's words. So anyone who could hear what Mao just said, as articulated by the music of Cornelius Cardew, and think we don't need a peace movement, they're out to lunch completely. Thoughts on multi-level marketing and Ponzi schemes? Well, I don't know much about Ponzi schemes. I don't know enough about what makes a Ponzi scheme, but multi-level marketing is really sad. It's sad. I remember when I first moved to New York, before I found my job that I had at the insurance company, I remember many places I would see advertised, oh, well, we're hiring. And then you call them up and it'd be like, well, actually, we want you to sell these products. So give us $300 first. And it was all, you know how many of those there are? There's a million of those, a million of them. And it's really annoying because you don't make money, right? Very few people actually make money from those things, right? Some people are able to make it work. But it's an example of cannibalistic capitalism. I mean, it's people get poor and don't have jobs, and so they have these jobs that steal money from people. And it's awful, right? It's just an awful thing. I don't know. I know that there are different ones. I mean, a lot of them are just pretty. I mean, they're just pretty straightforward. I mean, it's like someone's unemployed. And so you go and you meet them and you're there to talk about a job and they say, oh, well, you sell these fancy knife sets and you give us $300 to buy 10 of them. And then you can sell them for, for $1,000. I mean, it's awful. Right. And are you going to sell 10 fancy knife sets? No. And oh yeah, it's awful. And a lot of people get preyed on. And that I understand that in Salt Lake City, in Utah, Idaho, places like that, the Mormon community has been really badly hit by those because they're very close knit, and that it's like stay-at-home moms get caught up in that a lot. And that there's a lot of I think there's a lot of multi-level marketing schemes that involve like makeup and women's accessories, jewelry, and things like that. There's a million of those floating around, and it sucks because people need jobs. They need real jobs. And, there are some people that can make that work, and to those people, I mean, if you can make it work, right? If you can make, selling jewelry or selling makeup or accessories or whatever, if you can make it work and that's a way you can pay your bills, I respect that. But a lot of people just get ripped off by that. They're looking for a real job. They go for what they think is a real job interview, and they show up and they say, oh, yeah, you can make all kinds of money. But to make that money, you've got to pay us all this money and it's shit, and it sucks. It's really, really too bad. And then they end up just kind of preying on all their friends, I don't know. I mean, there's been a couple times, every so often, I get approached by one that's really sad, somebody that I haven't spoken to in years, in decades, will reach out to me on Facebook and be like, Caleb, I remember you from when we went to high school together. I remember you from, when we went to college together. I haven't spoken to you in years, but I've got this new thing and I really think it's a great opportunity. And can you spend $50 on legal and coding? Or it's one of those. And it's really sad. And it really sucks for the person. And I almost feel like the person is going to be embarrassed afterwards. That's the most painful part of seeing that when someone reaches out to me with one of those, is the person afterwards is going to be embarrassed. They're going to be embarrassed that they did that, and they're going to realize they got scammed, and they're going to feel like shit for having called me up, to try and get me to do it. And, you can spot them a mile away. It's always, and some of them are really weird. There's like legal, one of them's like a legal thing or something. There's one, right? I mean, some of them are really, really weird, right? I will say some of them are really goddamn weird. I don't know. One thing I do remember that was hilarious is the Workers' World Party. We would have a conference every year. I mean, now they've pretty much fallen apart. They haven't had a public conference in a long time. Every year we'd have our national conference. And this is when the internet, there was no social media back then. This is like 2007, 2008. And I remember one time we had our national conference and there's about 300 people there, and they would always open it up. There'd be like an open mic Q&A. So people would line up after they heard the speeches and get up there. And remember one year, never forget this. One guy got up there And he said, wow. He said, I love this organization. I'd never heard of the party, and you guys are communists and socialists. That's really, really great. But, if you're going to build your revolutionary party, you're going to need money. And what I've got here is this program where you can all make... That was a classic moment. That was one of the best moments at a communist conference I ever had, when the guy got up during the Q&A and tried to sign us up for his multi-level marketing scheme. He had a brilliant idea for his multi-level marketing scheme. That was special. The other thing that happened, why not? There was this guy who would always come, and he was like a young guy. He was in his 20s, and he was super nervous to be there. And he would come to the conference every year. We would never see him anywhere else. He never came to any meetings or anything. He would just show up once a year for the conference, and he would be nervous as hell, walking around nervously. And we would ask him why he was here, and he'd say, because my dad's a pilot. My dad's a pilot. This guy was probably an FBI informant or something, right? And he got a free flight. And the FBI sat down with him beforehand, and they're like, okay, if they ask you how you paid for your flight to get there, tell them that your dad's a pilot. So he had one line, and he would just walk around nervously, terrified of being around all these communists. And you'd say, oh, hi to meet you. And he'd be like, hi, I'm Sam. My dad's a pilot. It's like, good to meet you, Sam. His name wasn't Sam. It was something else. And he would just walk around, and it was like he had one sentence, my dad's a pilot. And he was terrified to be there, and he was nervous. And he would show up every year. And we would always joke about the my dad's a pilot guy who came to our national conference every year and would just say, my dad's a pilot. And we were convinced that guy was definitely FBI. He was definitely a cop. But maybe he wasn't. Maybe he was just a weird guy who his dad was a pilot. I don't know. But it was just, it was classic. That he had one line, my dad's a pilot. Well, because my dad's a pilot. Oh, okay, good to see you. And I always wonder how much of that is nepotism, the FBI agent, he's got a son who can't get his shit together. And so he gets him a gig, and he's like, all right, we'll pay you to go infiltrate the national conference of this communist group, and you have to wonder about how much of that goes on. But who knows? I have no idea. So there you go. But yeah, there was that guy. But yeah, I remember the guy who got up during the Q&A. And tried to sign us up for his multi-level marketing scheme. That was pretty sad. What else do I remember? I do remember, this was a classic one. There was a guy who was a socialist. He was like an old communist. And he had written a bunch of detective novels. He had written a bunch of detective novels that were socialist themed. And so he would pay the Workers' World Party to set up a table at the conference to try and sell his detective novels to everyone who came to the conference. That was always special. That was beautiful. It was kind of sweet. Things have changed a lot, but this is back when communism was kind of a fringe interest. And it was I feel like nowadays everything's on the internet, but back in those days, back in my day, young man, there were I think there would be event lists that would go out, and there were certain people that would go to every conference. If there was any kind of conference, they would just show up at it and try to sell their shit or something. So yeah, there was a guy who had self-published a number of detective novels with socialist themes, and he would have a literature table, and he would try to sell you his detective novels. And then there was the guy who got up and tried to sign us up for his multi-level marketing scheme. And then there was the guy who was like, my dad's a pilot. My dad's a pilot. So yeah, those were the days. Oh, but yeah, multi-level marketing schemes are very sad. It's just sad, and it's cannibalistic capitalism, right? They're not producing value now. It's sad. And it kind of parallels a trend. I don't see this as much anymore, but it seemed like around the time of the financial crisis, a lot of people would have just, when I worked at a gas station, right? You got paid minimum wage. Right. And if you'd been there a while, you might get paid maybe $1 more than minimum wage, but you were constantly getting a rating. I don't know. Anyone who's worked in retail might remember this. You were constantly getting a rating for how many candy bars you sold, and it was like suddenly your job, you're just a cashier, but you would say to the person, would you like to buy a candy bar? Would you like to buy this? And they had an automated computer rating they would give you about how many candy bars you sold. It was such bullshit. Such bullshit. And it was like, and I would go to the bank and I just want to I want to open a checking account. And the guy's like trying to sell me on 12 different kinds of credit cards or something. I'm like, just do your job. It's like they try to turn every job, you have to be a salesman. And it's kind of a multi-level marketing thing. So, there you go. All righty. As much as I am kind of, I liked selling newspapers on the street and stuff like that. But, the multi-level marketing schemes, it's sad. It's really sad. So there you go. All righty. Okay. Personal opinion. History tubers are worse than bread tubers. They manipulated children who ate still at school with cute drawing and memes to promote pro-imperialist narratives, and they're funded by the deep state. I don't watch these history tubers, but they sound like I could debunk some of them. Maybe we can start debunking history tubers on these channels. Maybe if you see some history tube content that would be easy to debunk, maybe send it my way. Send it my way, because I'm very into history, and I don't like pro-imperialist narratives. So maybe that's something I could do, is debunk some of this history tube. And Midwest Marx exposed that they were being funded by the NED and the CIA. And I got it, Jane. Got it. Thank you. And you're on the list, Jane. Don't worry. Look, Midwest Marx, I wish them the best. I agree with most of what they say and do. But what annoys me about them is that, they're being canceled the same way I've been canceled, right? Because how dare they support Oliver Anthony and Rich Man North of Richmond and all of that. And what annoys me about them is that they basically are trying to do what we do on these streams, except one, they're just trying to build a social media brand. They're not trying to build an actual organization, number one. And number two, they assume that the only reason we've been canceled is because we're stupid, right? That's what they assume. They assume that I'm just an idiot, right? And that we just aren't smart enough to maneuver around, and they can do what we did and not get canceled. Well, they're getting canceled right now, and that sucks, and my heart goes out to them. But I mean, I hate to say I told you so. And that whenever you play ball with the cancel people, you're helping that. And that's what these people don't understand. It's like McCarthyism. McCarthyism stopped when people stopped naming names. But what keeps it alive is when people play along with it. Midwest Marx is convinced, well, if we just stay away from Caleb, if we just stay away from CPI, and we denounce LaRouche, then they won't. No, doesn't work like that, right? And that, like, they're being canceled now over Oliver Anthony, right? Well, of course you are, because you play ball. We need people to just come down and say, cancel me, I don't give a fuck. That's how it will stop, is when people that are genuinely Marxist and genuinely anti-imperialist, people that are genuinely against World War III, just start saying, I don't care. I am going to go on the stage with whoever. I don't care. That's what will stop it. And until people have the courage to do that, right? Until people have the courage to do that, this cancel culture bullshit is going to keep going. And I'm tired of people playing the games, right? Someone called Eddie anti-Semitic. Of course they did, right? And they're going to call him a Nazi, and they're going to call him a pedo rapist. This is what people don't get. You have to just buckle down and say, you know what? Cancel me, assholes. I'm on the right side. I know I didn't do anything wrong. Eat shit. You know what I mean? That's what you have to do, right? That's what you have to do. You just have to say, oh, and when someone comes to you and says, oh, I can't believe you're associating with so-and-so, you just have to say, well, I don't know if what you're saying about them is true, and I don't care because I'm trying to stop World War III, so shut up, right? And I'm going to Rage Against the War Machine, and I'm going to talk to Oliver Anthony, and I don't care if this person's a LaRouche, and I don't care if this person's a this or that, and I don't know if that's true or not. I'm here to stop the war, period. And until people grow some, I don't know, I'm trying not to be vulgar and sexist here, but until people have some courage, okay? Until people have some goddamn courage, this is going to keep going. And Midwest Marx pisses me off because they are keeping it going. They are convinced if we just stay away from CPI, if we just stay away from LaRouche, look, I'm not, LaRouche is doing their own thing. We're, whatever. But I mean, it's the same. I don't care, right? And I decided a long time ago, and, Eddie is a good guy, right? He does great work, and I agree with him. And they tried to get him fired from his job. So he should know how toxic this stuff is. And he should know that you just have to just say no to cancel culture. You just have to say no to it. You can't play ball with it. You can't accommodate it. You just say no. You just say no. And if somebody comes with you, I can't believe you went on RT. RT is, and you just say no. And if someone comes to you with, oh my God, you're going to the Rage Against the War Machine rally, and what somebody there is a Republican, you just say no. Right? And until people learn to just say no. Right? I guess we're talking about, it's like Ronald Reagan, right? Just say no to drugs, but you got to just say no to cancel culture. And until people start doing that, it's going to keep going. And everybody who goes, oh, I can't appear with this person, they keep it going. They keep it going, right? They keep it going. And if you give it an inch, if you give them an inch, that's a mile. Now, and there's a difference, okay? Yes. Are there certain people that have come to CPI events before that we've kind of made a decision to separate from? Yes. But it's not because somebody said to us, oh my God, blah, blah, blah. It was because of how they conducted themselves at the event. They did things at the event that offended other people at the event. They were inappropriate in the way they treated other people. They made other friends uncomfortable at the event, not because of who they were, not because of what people on social media would say, but the way they conducted themselves. And that's different, right? Yes, there's nothing wrong with if someone's causing a real problem. Right? If someone comes to your event and is causing a problem, if somebody's working with you and doesn't treat you right, that's different. That's not cancel culture. But when we start disavowing people, oh, I want nothing to do with so-and-so, I denounce, stop it. Stop it. The only way this is going to stop is if people have courage. And anybody who goes along with that, fuck Jean Yu. Fuck Jean Yu, right? That little piece of shit. You know what I mean? That little piece of shit, right? He's whining that he's being canceled now. Well, you canceled me, right? He canceled me. He spread rumors about me. He stabbed me in the back. He didn't know anything about anything, so fuck you, Jean Yu. You know what I mean? And it's like these people that, and he's crying now that he's been canceled. Oh, they're coming after me. Well, why wouldn't they? You helped them come after me, right? You stabbed me in the back. Fuck you, Jean Yu. And I seriously, right? Seriously, if you don't stand up to this stuff, and it can be, keep in mind that you legitimately think someone did something wrong. You legitimately think they did something they shouldn't have done, or they take a position you don't like. It doesn't matter. When the people come at you, oh my God, are you associated with? You have to say, fuck you. You have to say, I know what I believe. This person is trying to stop World War III, and so I'm working with them. End of story. And if people don't have the courage to do that, this cancel culture thing is never going to end. And nobody who won't do that has any right to complain about cancel culture. As long as, and then they sit there, and it's the same people that have canceled a bunch of other people that have said, oh my God, did you know so-and-so is associated with so-and-so who one time is rumored to have, and they do this. And then it turns on them, and suddenly they're being canceled, and they're like, oh my God, why are all the big accounts being mean to me? Why are all the big Twitter accounts being mean to me? Well, because you went along with it, you fucking idiot. That's why. That's why. That's why. Because you went along with it. You can't feed the monster and then complain that the monster attacks you. You can't feed the monster and complain that the monster attacks you. If you feed the monster stays alive and it attacks you, right? And I am so tired of people who can't get this through their heads, right? They see how evil the cancel culture is until it's somebody that they, we have to learn to stick together. We have to learn to have each other's backs. And I will say this, and this is my new rule. I will not work with weak people because weak people are wreckers. It's not a question of good and evil. It's not a question of anything but strength and weakness. The people who cancel other people are weak people. And the people who say, fuck you, are strong people. Now, that doesn't mean not everyone can be public, right? Some people need to create a layer. They need to maybe use a fake name or not be in the video. That's okay too. But the people who betray, the people who become cancel, the people who denounce and disavow, those people are weak people. And I don't want to work with weak people. I would rather work with 5 strong people than 50 weak people, because those weak people, 2 weeks from now, when the going gets tough, they'll stab me in the back. Wreckers are weaklings when it really gets down to it. It's not that they're weak and they lack psychological strength, right? Everybody loves you when things are going well, but when you have hardship, all of a sudden they're gone. And sometimes you need a purge. CPI had a great purge last August. All the weaklings, all the wreckers, all the fair weather friends that just liked us because they thought we had money, or just liked us because they thought maybe I could get them a job at RT, or they all those people are gone. Good riddance. And don't let the door hit you on the way out. And I hope that I will make sure that everyone else in this business knows what you are, right? And knows how you are, and that the only way cancel culture will stop is if people stand up to it. And so Midwest Marks is being canceled, and they do great work, but they play ball with this, right? They play ball with this. They try to find ways that they can kind of go along with it, or, and unless you double down, and so, I don't think Midwest Marks is my enemy. I don't think they're my enemy. And I agree with the most of what they put out, but they're being weak and they play ball with cancel culture. They play ball with cancel culture. They're weak and they have not been good to CPI. They are convinced that the only reason we've been canceled is because we're stupid. Well, no, you're being canceled right now. And it's not because you're stupid. It's because of all the good things you do. So, I would appreciate some goddamn respect from these people. This arrogance. Oh, well, if we just don't do what Caleb did. No. They were canceling me from the moment I started to get internet fame. They were calling me a Nazi. They were calling me a white supremacist. They were calling me this. They were calling me that. They were trying to dig up. They were digging up anything they could, and it didn't matter, right? If I had done nothing but feed old women, feed elderly people and help them cross the street and find nice homes for lost puppies, they would have still canceled me and called me an evil white supremacist. They do things that are so ridiculous to people. Look at some of what they've done to Haas. Look at some of what they've done to me. It doesn't matter. You will never please these people. You will never please these people. Nothing that you do is ever okay. None of their rules apply, mind you. None of their rules apply, right? They all have rules about inclusion and tolerance. All their rules will fall out the window. You know what I mean? They love to, they'll cancel you for, they have no principles whatsoever, okay? They have no principles whatsoever. They have no interest in telling the truth. Look, Socialism Done Left called Oliver Anthony a pedophile and distorted the lyrics of his song and called him pro-Epstein. And when I tweeted about this, he didn't think there was anything wrong with it because he sees Oliver Anthony as a Trump supporter. That is who we're dealing with. We're not dealing with honest actors. We're not dealing with people we can appease if we just do the right things, if we just walk on eggshells. No, we are dealing with Satan. We are dealing with Satan. We are dealing with people that are satanic and pure evil. We are dealing with degrowth Malthusians. That's what we are dealing with. We are dealing with people who cyberbully people into committing suicide as a form of fucking entertainment. Right? You cannot appease these people. You cannot make them happy. They destroy people. They destroy people's reputations. And there is nothing we can do. And I have lost my patience with watching people like Midwest Marks and others sit there and, I can just walk on eggshells. No, you fucking can't. Have some goddamn courage. Right? Have some goddamn courage. I am so tired of it. I am so tired of these people. Right? So tired of it. So tired of watching people play this game. And if we just do the right things, we won't get canceled. I didn't get canceled because I'm stupid, motherfucker. I got canceled because I stand for these principles that you also claim to stand for, and they're coming for you for the exact same reason, right? You know, they're coming for the exact same reason. And anyone who does good work is going to get smeared and lied about. And this walking on eggshells, if we just accommodate them, you're helping it happen. It's going to lose its energy pretty soon. Give it a year or two. And the scary thing is, on the other side of this, and this is the scary thing about all of this, there are actual rapists in this world. There are actual Nazis in this world. There are actual pedophiles in this world. There are actual white supremacists in this world. And on the other side of this, no one's going to care about that. And do you realize how dangerous this is? Give it 1 or 2 years. They've been doing, every male politician is a rapist. Every male politician is a molester, right? You know, and everyone who disagrees with the left on anything is secretly a Nazi and a white supremacist. Give it a couple years. Give it a couple years, and actual white supremacists are going to be walking around and no one's going to care. And politicians and male public figures are going to be guilty as hell of sexual assault and rape and all kinds of stuff, and no one's going to care. And you know whose fault that's going to be? That's going to be their fucking fault. Rape is rape. Sexual assault is sexual assault. Neo-Nazism is neo-Nazism. But because the stupid internet woke crowd has decided all kinds of people and all kinds of things that are not rape, that are not molestation, that are not sexual assault, that are not white supremacism, that are not neo-Nazism, they've gone out of their way to lie about so many fucking people. So many people have been smeared like this that pretty soon no one's going to care about any of this, and they'll have no one but themselves to blame. They started this. They started this. They wouldn't let it die. You know, they made clear that they're partisan. Tara Reade's story is absolutely true, and they don't care. They just said, oh, Russia. You know, meanwhile, I mean, I don't want to talk too much about specific cases, but there are certain cases where it's all bullshit. It's all bullshit. Louis C.K., right? Nothing he did was not consensual. Should he have not done what he did? Sure, he made some bad decisions. But the detail that was left out of all of it was that he asked permission every single time. You know? Does that matter? No. So you can't equate Louis C.K. with a rapist, right? He said, can I do this thing? Now, I would personally think he shouldn't be asking permission at work. That kind of thing has no place in the workplace. But this idea that he's a rapist, no, he inappropriately asked to do something, and when he got permission, he did it, and he shouldn't have done that. And, you know, it was inappropriate behavior. But you can't equate him with a rapist. You can't equate him with a pedophile. You can't equate him with any of those things. He, you know, there you go. You know, and this is getting stupid. It's getting stupider by the day, right? And on the other side of this, is a world that's the Wild West, and it's going to be the Wild West. Look, I keep talking about the storm is going to come, right? The third world laughs about this kind of thing. In countries where they're having actual civil wars, in countries where there's mass poverty and armed insurrections going on, do you think people are sitting there and worrying about stuff like this? No. No, they're not. No, they are not. And when shit hits the fan, which it's going to, I hate to sound like a pessimist because I'm all about optimism here, but a storm is coming. A storm is coming, and shit is going to hit the fan. And pretty soon, there's going to be actual Nazis all over this country. And we're going to remember, hey, remember when we were calling all kinds of people fake Nazis? And we're going to, you know, and we're going to say, oh, wow, remember when we were worried about, you know, politicians and whether or not they, you know. And it's going to be pretty sad. Because when shit hits the fan, when the storm comes, which the storm is coming, we are getting closer to the storm every goddamn day. The economy is getting ready. It's lurking and creaking and moaning. And, we're about to have an election. I mean, the storm is coming. When the storm comes, none of this bullshit is going to matter. That's what I'm saying. And yeah, and again, of course they will, right? They've done so much to me at this point. I don't give a fuck, right? I'm not, rape is rape. Sexual assault is sexual assault. Nazism is Nazism. Pedophilia is pedophilia. These things do exist, and they're disgusting. But there's a whole lot of other shit that has nothing to do with that. And, every single person, and they do it to all sides. It's getting stupid. It's getting stupid. It's getting stupid. It's getting stupider by the minute. It's getting stupider by the minute. And the only way this will stop, well, let me rephrase that. There are two ways that this will stop. One is when people just stand up against it and say, no, that's not what happened. No, that's not what happened. I don't care about that. Maybe this person did something they shouldn't have done, but that's not the same as what you're saying. So no, I don't care about that. And two, when shit gets real. And when shit gets real, no one's going to care about this. You think in African countries where there's like an armed civil war going on and the military is fighting, do you think they care about any of this? Right? Like, imagine that you were in Niger right now, right? Where there's just the military just took over the government. And imagine that you ran to somebody and you said, oh my God, the leader of the military, I heard that, that he, had an affair with a woman on his staff and it was consensual, but she felt like she had, they would just laugh at you. They would just laugh at you. Imagine that you're, look at Haiti right now. Haiti, where the president got kidnapped and killed. And there's rebellions in the streets, and there's that guy, what's his name, the Haitian revolutionary guy, what is his name, Jimmy Barbecue, and all of that. Imagine that you went to someone in the Haitian government. You said, I think that Jimmy Barbecue might be a secret Nazi. I looked at the hand signs that he made in his post. They would laugh at you. They would fucking laugh at you. They would fucking laugh at you. They would fucking laugh at you. And when shit gets real, no one's going to care about any of this bullshit. I'm just telling you. And if you're in this for fucking real, then you don't care about any of this bullshit either. And if you're a joker, if you're a clown, if you're an arrogant, then you care about this. But I'm just telling you, none of this stuff really matters. None of this stuff really matters. If you're in a Haitian neighborhood and there's a fight going on between Jimmy Barbecue's faction and the other faction, no one gives a fuck about Jimmy Barbecue's sex life. No one gives a fuck about whether or not Jimmy Barbecue is secretly a Nazi or whether the post that he made was... And when shit gets real, no one cares about any of this. No one cares about any of this. This is all very privileged. This is all very first world privilege. I'm just telling you. Yes, rape is rape. Sexual assault is sexual assault. Nazis are Nazis. Actual Nazis are actual Nazis, and they're very easy to deal with. When people are getting together and committing hate crimes and seizing control of governments and trying to purge society of ethnic groups and committing genocide, it's pretty obvious. But what we're doing right now in the West, this silly internet stuff, this is a pure example of first world problems. First world problems. That doesn't mean... And here's the thing. People do bad things. People make mistakes. People exercise poor judgment. People make mistakes. Okay? They do. They do. And, that happens. But that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about people equating things that cannot be equated. So, you don't have to agree with everything. I'm sure all of you have done things in your life that I disagree with, that I think were not right, that I wish you wouldn't have done. So, anyway, if that rant doesn't get me in trouble, I don't think it would. But, who knows? They've thrown so much at me at this point. whatever. Anyway, good work. All right. Caleb and Stalin's critique of anarchism. Well, Stalin's book on anarchism is very well written, and his main focus is on explaining dialectics and explaining the nature of reality and explaining that you can't will the ideal world onto the reality, right? That the future society has to come out of the society we're in right now. Stalin's book, Marxism versus Anarchism, which I've got up there on the shelf somewhere, is actually very good. It's very well written. You know, it's very well written and it's very good. And, you know, Stalin is a brilliant organizer and a brilliant writer. And I recommend, I mean, again, Stalin was a genius organizer. He was a genius writer, etc. So there we go. All righty. Is Zionism antithetical to Christianity and Judaism? Okay. I believe Zionism is antithetical to Christianity because Zionism says that Zionism is Jewish supremacism. It says that one ethnic religious group is superior to all others, and therefore it, has the right to rule over them, right? Zionism as an ideology is a supremacist ideology for one religious ethnic group, and that is contrary to the Bible. The Bible talks about, they have the Good Samaritan, and the point of the Good Samaritan is that this person may have been a Samaritan, but they did what was right, and so their race or ethnic background, tribal background didn't matter, right? Christianity, a big part of Christianity, especially if you read the epistles, is that, Apostle Paul says you can be circumcised in the spirit rather than physically circumcised, and that basically Christianity is for everybody. God is for everybody. He's not for one ethnic group. He's not for one tribe. You don't have to be born into it. So it is contrary to Christianity. Unfortunately, the majority of Zionists in America are Christian at this time, right? Christians, largely, a lot of them have been convinced that it is their duty to support Israel. Now, as far as Judaism, I am not an expert on the Jewish religion. And I have spoken and interviewed many Jews who are against Zionism. And what they have told me is that the Jewish religion teaches that only the Messiah can create Israel, that that Israel must be created by the Messiah. All right? And so some Orthodox Jews will not call Israel, Israel. They think that's a sin. So they call it Eretz Disrael, which is the land of Israel. Right? And there are even some Orthodox Jews, a very small minority, who are full-on anti-Israel because they believe that Israel is a violation of the Jewish teaching. The majority of Jews in the world overwhelmingly support Israel and among religious and cultural secular Jews, there's a feeling that Israel is good. So I have no authority with which to speak on the Jewish religion. I have interviewed Rabbi Weiss. I have interviewed and spoken with Orthodox Jews who are against serving in the military. One year I remember there was I was covering the United Nations General Assembly when Netanyahu was speaking, and there were a group of Orthodox Jews who had a crane. They had this giant crane, and they unfurled this huge banner condemning Netanyahu for drafting them into the military. Because their religion as Orthodox Jews says that they cannot serve in the Israeli military because only the Messiah can create the Israeli state. And so if they serve in its military, they're fighting in a military for an entity that is falsely claiming to be the Israeli state. I interviewed them about it. It was very interesting to hear their perspective. So I really don't have any authority with which to speak to Judaism. I will tell you the majority of Jews in this world believe that Israel, Zionism, and Judaism can coincide. There is a minority, a small minority of Orthodox Jews who don't believe that. And I think there are some what you call Reformed Jews that are full-on anti-Israel. That practice Reformed Judaism but reject supporting Israel. Even the bulk of Reformed Jews, though, believe in supporting Israel. They're critical. There's an organization called J Street, and they criticize Israel for violating Palestinian human rights, but they still believe Israel should exist. So there you go. All right. All right. Thank you for all your work. We're family. The world is your family. Thank you, Felonious Punk. And, I don't know. I don't know. Whatever. I just got to keep going, my friend. Keep going. Keep going. We are undefeatable. We will not surrender. We will not back down. That's the important thing. All righty. Russia gets blamed for so much more for the Holodomor than Britain will ever get blamed for the potato famine in Ireland. It's not just the potato famine in Ireland. Britain oversaw many man-made famines. Many man-made famines all over the world. They have overseen many of them. Many man-made famines. They've overseen famines in India, famines in Iran. Everywhere the British Empire went, they were starving people. And it wasn't in their own country. It was all over the places they took over. Well, Ukraine was part of the Soviet Union. There was a famine there. And they've tried to exaggerate this famine into like an intentional genocide or something. It's like there were crop failures all over the Soviet Union. Ukraine is a high concentration of farming. So they were harder hit. But, the idea that Stalin was intentionally trying to wipe out Ukrainians as a race or something, that's a Nazi lie, right? There was a famine in Ukraine. A lot of people starved. A lot of people, and it was bad. And I'm sure that the Soviet leaders realized that if they could have done it differently, they could have had different results. But the idea that Stalin just hated Ukrainians on an ethnic basis and was trying that's a Nazi lie. That's Stepan Bandera propaganda. So was there a famine? Yes. Did policies that the Soviet Union had possibly contribute to that famine? Yes. Was it what they make it out, like an intentional genocide to exterminate the Ukrainians as a nationality? No, it was not. So there you go. There you go. All righty. Thank you, Gala. And, we just keep going. We will never back down. We will never surrender. We're building the Center for Political Innovation. Our organization is marching ahead. Our organization is marching ahead. We will never surrender. And yeah, you just have to be in this for real. You just have to be in this for real. All right. I've been watching Alejandro Jodorowsky and Ralph Balsky and Takashi Miike and several other directors. They tend to use shock and gross stuff to fight the establishment because it goes against mainstream social norms. That's interesting. I've critiqued the grossness in art. That's been one of the recurring themes on these streams. So there you go. There you go. There you go. Oh, another from Jason. Wow. All right. Well, I will put that on the list. Jason, you're on the list. Have no fear. But yeah, I've critiqued. That's a recurring theme is our critique of grossness in art. And the new left, right? The synthetic left, the Congress for Cultural Freedom, the CIA was all about grossness in art. It's sick. Like, why would you want art to be gross? Art is supposed to be about bringing beauty to the world. But that's the way the evil Malthusians, they're anti-human. They want us to be depressed. They want us to be hopeless. The music they promote is depressing. It's designed to make you depressed, right? There's just so much that they do that is just designed to kill us. They want to kill us psychologically. It's evil, right? And that's why I will respect Lyndon LaRouche because, some of this stuff is not within the frame of Marxism. Some of this is. Lyndon LaRouche, I respect as an individual, as much as I disagree with his group in some ways and with his message, some of the stuff he was darn right about. And the ugliness in art that they're promoting, you can't explain that in terms of just Marxism. There's an evil that exists in the world. Satan exists, right? There is a spiritual force of evil, I think, behind some of this. Right? You can't just put it all in material terms. I'm not a pure materialist, and I talk about that in the book that's about to come out. Tomorrow, I will be with Lori Spencer and a number of high-level important people on an upcoming stream. That is definitely happening, and it's tomorrow evening. I'll be on Twitter Space. Garland Nixon's going to be on there. Nick Brana, all kinds of people. It's going to be a really, Convo Couch. It's going to be a really important stream, and I'm really glad that I can be part of it. And I'll be on for the full 2 hours. I'll be there the whole time. And it's against censorship, tech censorship, and all of that. It's going to be really, really great. So tune in tomorrow. I'll be on Twitter Space. It's going to be awesome. All righty. All right. on one of these streams, can you feature some of President Xi's quotes from the BRICS summit? I can do that. Yeah, I was, I'm streaming like every night nowadays, so I don't see why not. Don't see why not. I can certainly do that. Certainly do that. I just have to download some clips, and I can do that, John. You betcha. You betcha. All righty. I already played that song. We did that. Why do Brits have self-depreciating sense of humor? I don't know. Like, here's the thing, right? British comedy, right? On British television, there's a lot of comedy, right? And we in America, we get some of it. PBS will show it. There's Monty Python, and there's what was that show that, oh goodness, I can't remember the show. It's like the same guy through generations of English history. I can't remember what it's called. And there's Fry and Laurie. What is it? A bit of Fry and Laurie. And there's, what is his name? Benny Hill. And the thing is, to be fair, I think we only get like the best of the best. We don't get, we don't get all of Are You Being Served, of course, and Coupling. I remember the show Coupling, and that, we're seeing like the best British humor that is funny enough that they think it's good enough to serve to us here in America. But there's a lot of British television humor, BBC shows and stuff, that's not as funny, right? Yeah, Blackadder, that's what I was thinking of. Blackadder, right? And Faulty Towers, who can forget? There's a lot of British television humor that doesn't make the grade, right? That isn't as funny. But, I think we see the best of the best. And I wouldn't call all of it self-depreciating. I mean, some of it is a little smarter, right? But not all of it. Some of it's very crass and stupid. Benny Hill is very crass and stupid. I don't know. I mean, British humor comes in all types. I mean, there's like the dry where they, they're like sarcastic kind of, right? I've never watched Doctor Who, Joe. I just have never watched it, so I can't comment on it. I've never watched it. I know that they've done a different season. It's been going for years. I just never watched the show. There's all different types of British humor, right? That physical comedy, puns, some of it's a little more intellectual than others, I mean, I don't know. I mean, people making jokes at their own expense. People do that, right? It's just a way to be polite. Could we have one night where we all just watch an old Roger Corman horror movie or some such fun? I don't know Roger Corman. Tell me about Roger Corman, Felonius. I don't know about him. Right? My favorite horror movies, as I've told you all on these streams many times, is Hammer. I like Hammer. Those are the horror movies I like. I don't know Roger Corman well enough. So there we go. There we go. They hated the Hawaii emergency system ever since it gave birth to Tulsi Gabbard's campaign. Is that true? What's the story there, John? I want to investigate this. I want to learn more about this. If that's true, that's amazing. Because I like Tulsi Gabbard a lot. And there you go. There you go. So can you talk about the Iraq-Iran war and Baathism? My interpretation of the Iraq-Iran war is that in the Middle East, there were two revolutionary anti-imperialist currents. One was Baathist Arab socialism. Baathist Arab socialism, that's a political movement. It started in Syria. There was a guy named Michel Aflaq. And Michel Aflaq was a member of the Syrian Communist Party. And during World War II, the Syrian Communist Party was told to not fight the French imperialists anymore and to align with the French colonizers because the Soviet Union was on France's side in World War II. And he said, well, fuck that. And he said, I'm not working with the colonizers. So he split from the Syrian Communist Party and he started his own party called the Baath Party. And Baath means Renaissance or rebirth or resurrection, which I think is a really awesome name. And it was a rebirth of Arab civilization. Baath, rebirth, resurrection, Arab socialism. And Baathism is a great political movement. You read about Baathism, it is, and it draws heavily from Marxism, quotes Marx and all of that, but it also, it's Islamic. And, Michel Aflaq was from a Christian family. He'd been a communist atheist, but he converted to Islam because he saw Islam as the spirit of the Arab people. It was, if he was going to love the Arab people, he had to be a Muslim, even though that was not his background or whatever. And I think highly of Baathism as a political movement. Baathism, you had the patriotic officers that in Egypt and elsewhere, and you had in Syria and Egypt, you had Baathist governments come into being. Baathists believe in secular government, even though they embrace Islam as the religion of the Arab people. They believed in having a government that wasn't loyal to any religion. Right? Christians had rights, Jews had rights, etc. And it was a largely secular movement, and that it was tied in with the military. It tended to be the military. The military in Arab countries would have what they called patriotic officers. They would form a secret society. And they would take over. They would align with the Soviet Union. They'd start building socialist economics in the country. That was one political movement. And then you had Khomeiniism. And Khomeiniism was fundamentalist Islamic, what do you want to call it? It was very, very devout, dedicated Shia Islam, right? And Khomeini was this preacher. He was just this well-known Islamic preacher in Iran, and he was an extreme conservative, so much so that when the Shah granted women the right to vote and things like that, he fled the country because he was opposing it, and he was rallying Muslims to oppose the Shah because the Shah was too modern and such. So Khomeini fled Iran, and he lived in France for a while and lived in Britain for a while, and he was in exile. But there were a lot of Muslims in Iran who were really inspired by his teachings and listened. They would smuggle audio cassette tapes back into Iran, and people would listen to Khomeini, and he was just this well-loved religious leader. In the 1970s, Khomeini's changed a lot. His message became much more anti-capitalist, much more anti-imperialist. He began rallying around the slogan, not capitalism, but Islam, war of poverty against wealth, neither East nor West. He would condemn the military and economic imperialism of America and the social imperialism of the Soviet Union. He thought the Soviet Union was imposing their atheism and their secular culture, and America was imposing its economics and its military on countries. And he opposed both, neither East nor West, not capitalism, but Islam, war of poverty against wealth. And Khomeini, he was just this well-respected cleric, this well-respected religious leader. And in 1979, all over Iran, there were protests demanding human rights and uprisings in Iran. And so Khomeini got on a plane and he came back, and the military of Iran went over to his side, and they had a revolution, the Islamic Revolution of Iran. Now, why did Iran not have a communist revolution in 1979? Well, for a couple reasons. The main reason is that right after the Islamic Revolution, things were still pretty unstable, and the communists were a big part of the revolution. The various communist parties were there, but then Iraq invaded Iran, and so then they were facing a foreign invader. And so at that point, it was, are you with the Iraqis or are you with the Iranians, right? Are you with the Iranians? And their new leader was Khomeini. And the Iraqi government, the Baath government, called itself a socialist government, was aligned with the Soviet Union. So the communists were immediately suspected in the minds of the public as being on the wrong side. And so the communist parties were outlawed, and people saw the communists as being allies of the Iraqi invaders. And so Khomeini's rule was kind of solidified. Iraq basically made sure the Islamic Republic stayed in power, before that. The other reason is that in Iran, prior to the Islamic Revolution of 1979, there were three major communist parties. The first was called the Tudeh Party. And the Tudeh Party, it was the main Soviet-aligned communist party, was not a very revolutionary party. It was pretty weak. It was pretty reformist. It had barely, it had barely fought against the coup that overthrew Mossadegh, and it had been underground and illegal, but it was weak. It was weak and reformist, and it was just, it kind of been watered down its ideology, right? And then you had this other group called the People's Fedayeen Guerrillas, and they were they were kind of Maoists, kind of Che Guevaranists, new left, and they were waging a guerrilla war in the countryside. They were trying to wage like a people's war in the countryside. They underestimated how religious the people in the countryside of Iran are. The people in the countryside of Iran are very devoutly religious, and the Fedayeen were very atheistic. On top of that, China was a country that a lot of the Fedayeen were looking to for inspiration, and China backed the Shah. China supported the Shah of Iran, right? And they supported, they welcomed the Shah of Iran. They were funding and giving development, and China was aligned with the regime, and so China wasn't offering them any support. Wasn't offering them any support. So there was that. And then the other group was called the Mujahideen Khalq, and they were Islamo-Marxists, and they were nut jobs, and they believed that their leader, Masoud Rajavi, they believed he was a prophet sent to earth, the reincarnation of both Jesus and the Prophet Muhammad and Lenin, all combined into one, and he was going to lead a global Islamic communist revolution. And they did suicide bombings, and they were crazy nut jobs, right? And they were, they were extremists, and they were just crazy nut jobs. So all three of those parties were not going to take power. The Tudeh party was not going to take power, right? The People's Fedayeen guerrillas were not going to take power, and the Mujahideen Khalq was not going to take power, right? The Tudeh was too reformist. The Fedayeen, they were too anti-religious. They were in the countryside, and China, wasn't supporting them. And then the Mujahideen Khalq were nut jobs, right? And now they work for Israel. Now they're Israeli agents. The Mossad uses them to assassinate Iranian nuclear scientists and such. They basically just become Zionist neocons. But, so those three communist parties, none of them had their shit together, right? Meanwhile, Khomeini had a lot of support. A lot of top Iranian generals were deeply devout religious Muslims who were listening to Khomeini's sermons and preaching. And that within the military, within the Iranian state, there were a lot of people within the government that, even though they were technically loyal to the Shah, they were loyal to Khomeini. Khomeini had a huge base of support in the country because it was a deeply religious country. And based on that, Khomeini, was able to come to power as a result of the overthrow of the Shah. And then Iraq invaded, and because Iraq was associated with the Soviet Union and was calling itself a socialist, it was Ba'athist Arab socialism, a Marxist government, all the communist groups immediately got labeled as supporting Iraq. And so they were outlawed, and so that was that. You weren't going to have a communist revolution. So the Islamic Revolution took power, and the Islamic Revolution, it was forced by the invasion of Iraq to move in a more anti-capitalist direction, right? The Basij councils, they formed these things that are like Soviets, community assemblies. The Basij councils, they formed, they had a construction jihad, which was like a 5-year plan where they mobilized the country to build and construct. And, the anti-capitalist aspects of the Islamic Revolution really escalated, after Iraq invaded. Basically, what happened was the United States played two revolutionary anti-imperialist currents against each other. And what's interesting is in most of the Middle Eastern countries, in the Arab world, and the other countries in the Middle East, because, Iran is not an Arab country. They're Persians in Iran. I mean, there are some Arabs, but it's largely a Persian country, right? There's also Turkmen, right? There's Kurds in Iran. There's different ethnic groups in Iran, but it's largely a Persian country. It's the Persians, Persia, right? But in the Middle East, you tend to have two political currents, right? At this time. Now it's different. But at that time, you tended to have the military that were Arab nationalists, right? Were nationalistic and favored a secular government. And then you tended to have and they were tied in with like the richest people in the country that were in with the military and the government. And then you had the petty bourgeoisie, or the merchants, right? The people that were lower level capitalists, and they tended to be in with Islam, right? And they were against nationalism because a lot of them would not be Arab if it was an Arab country. They'd be of an ethnic minority, but they would argue with Islam, there are no nationalities, right? We're all one under anyone who recognizes Islam. We're all the same. So the Muslim Brotherhood, that was the main current among the petty bourgeoisie, among the merchant class, right? And among the military, Baathism or Arab nationalism, Baathist Arab socialism was prominent among the military. There was a divide, Now Iran is not an Arab country, number one. Iran is Shia. It's a Shia country rather than a Sunni country. So the Muslim Brotherhood is Sunni. So you didn't have the Muslim Brotherhood. But the Khomeini movement, the clerics in Iran, their support tended to come from the middle class. The wealthiest people in Iran were nationalistic. They were in with the Shah. right? Whereas the clerics, right, the support for the clerics and the religious movement in Iran tended to be from the middle class, the small business owners, the merchants, and from non-Persians, right? And under the Shah, the Persians, they were kind of the ruling ethnic group. Well, the reason it's called Iran and not Persia is because of the fact that, the Islamic Revolution of Iran made all people in the country equal, right? Persians, Arabs, Turkmen, Kurds, all had equal rights. Well, it wasn't like that, right? When it was Persia, the Persians ruled. Well, now in Iran, it's the Islamic Republic. It's not the Persian kingdom. So there's that, right? So basically, you had two revolutionary anti-imperialist currents. One, Shia Islamic revolutionary anti-imperialism, and the other, Arab Baathist nationalism. And the U.S. imperialists played them against each other. And they made Iraq terrified. Iraq is a majority Shia country. Shia is the majority religion in the country. And Iraq was setting up a secular government. And Saddam Hussein, the USA apparently manipulated his fear that the Shia clerics might have an uprising in Iraq and try to take over Iraq and make an Islamic Republic in Iraq. And they made him very afraid of that. And that provoked one thing. And the USA basically goaded and pushed Saddam Hussein into attacking Iran. Iran fought back, and it's proven that the USA was on both sides of that war. The USA gave weapons to Iraq, and the USA gave weapons to Iran, right? At various times. Israel was also on both sides of that war at various times. That is my interpretation. And, that is my interpretation. And I will say this, right? Well, I don't even know if I want to say this. You know what? I don't even want to say any more about it. So, the Iraq-Iran war was a horrible, horrible event. And chemical weapons were used, and it was awful. And, we should acknowledge how awful it was for the United States to do what it did during that war, And the USA fomented that war and tried to keep it going as long as possible. And American media covered it up and pretended it wasn't happening. American media didn't acknowledge it, and at least 1 million people died in that war. And this is an example. This is Brzezinski, the strategy of chaos, the strategy of inciting different currents against each other, right? And look, Saddam Hussein is dead. He's been dead a long time. Baathism is never coming back to power in Iraq. And anyone who thinks Baathism is going to come back to power in Iraq has a hole in their head. But the Islamic Republic of Iran is the center of anti-imperialist and anti-Zionist resistance in the Middle East. They are allies of the Yemeni people. They are allies of the people of Bahrain. They are allies of the Palestinians, one of the biggest allies of the Palestinians. They're the biggest allies of Syria. They've done so much to defend the Syrian Arab Republic. So anyone who claims to be a communist or a socialist or claims to be an anti-imperialist and spends all their time bashing Iran is a fraud. I'll just tell you that, right? During the time of the Iraq-Iran war, there were a lot of communists that were on Iraq's side. Okay, because of Iraq was, I can understand being confused during those years because it was confusing. But anyone now in 2023 who's going around bashing Iran is not an anti-imperialist. Iran is the center of anti-imperialism. They just joined the BRICS. Iran is the center of anti-imperialist resistance. It is a stronghold of anti-imperialist resistance in the Middle East. So if somebody claims to be an anti-imperialist and they're talking about Iran and how bad Iran is, they're a fraud. Okay? And even if they say true things, right? Even if they pull up some facts from the 1980s that might be true, I'm sorry, there's no way to dispute that at this moment, the center of anti-imperialist resistance in the Middle East is Iran. That's just a fact. Okay, they are the main anti-imperialist country. It's aligned with Russia. It's aligned with China. It's aligned with North Korea. It's aligned with Venezuela. Very close to Venezuela these days. Very close to Nicaragua. Iran is where it's at in the Middle East. They are the force of resistance at this time. So anyone who tries to tell you they're an anti-imperialist but goes, oh, Iran, blah, 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 tell them to shut the fuck up. Iran has problems. There's corruption in Iran. Human rights, not perfect. The way women are treated and their legal code, not perfect. Iran has problems. Iran absolutely has problems. I'm not denying that. I'm not denying there aren't things in Iran that need to be fixed or whatever. But anyone who tries to tell you that, oh, you can be anti-imperialist in the Middle East but hate Iran. No. Iran is on the right side, period. Okay. Next question. All right. Someone should record a Chairman Mao versus Internet Maoists epic rap battle. I would be amused by that. But I'd have to find someone who knows how to rap. I think Gavin, one of our CPI members, he dabbles in the rapple, right? He dabbles in hip hop some. So maybe he can try that. I don't know. But there you go. There you go. All righty. Have your parents' views of communism changed since your work? I don't want to talk about my family on here very much. It's not my place to do that. I can just say my parents are not communists. Okay, they're not, and they never will be. But has their view changed? I mean, they obviously know a lot more about it because they have a son who's been living it for decades. They obviously have seen the communist world. I mean, when I was a kid, my parents didn't even know they were communists. I guess they had some vague idea. I think my dad remembered Students for a Democratic Society when he was in college. He said there were people on his college campus that wore black armbands with peace signs on them. And he said they were Stalinists. He said they were all Stalinists. So, I mean, my parents must have had some understanding that communists existed in America. I think my parents told me they went to a Pete Seeger concert one year and they saw the CPUSA had a literature table. But other than that, my parents are not whatever. And I'm not here to talk about my family, right? Privacy, right? I respect people's privacy and, whatever, you got to respect people's privacy, you have the right to privacy. I do too. Look, I mean, I have had my privacy violated to such an extreme degree now. I mean, it's not like anything I could say that would come out is going to be like damning. It's not like, oh, he better not reveal bum, bum, bum. No, it's not that. It's just, I respect my parents. They could be watching now for all I know. I really doubt it, but they could be watching right now. And I mean, how would they feel if I was on here telling all kinds of personal things about them? And I don't speak for them. I mean, I don't speak for them. I'll say they're more Democrats now. I mean, they were always Democrats when I was a kid. But now they're much more partisan to the Democratic Party and they've gotten further left in the Democratic Party sense than when I was a kid. Let me just put it that way. I mean, they were always Democrats, but their views have become they're more fanatically anti-Republican than they used to be. And that's ironic because now I'm, more sympathetic to Donald Trump and stuff. I mean, I'm not a Trump supporter, but I'm a little more, I think the Democrats are the main danger at this point. So it's kind of ironic, right? We've kind of flipped places, right? My parents were much more conservative than I was when I was a kid. And now I'm much more friendly to conservatives than they are. I don't know. The main thing is that, for me and for those of us watching this, our politics are huge. Our politics are huge. I'm Donald Trump. We have the most huge politics in the world. Our politics are the most huge politics ever. But no, I'm joking. But we've got huge politics, right? We know about Trotskyism and libertarianism and, trad Catholic politics. We know about all kinds of stuff. For most Americans, politics is D or R, elephant or donkey, right? That's what most Americans think politics is, right? For most Americans, politics is D or R, elephant or donkey. Okay. So you have to understand we're kind of out of step. We think about politics on a very, what would be the right word? A very different level than most Americans do. So, I don't know. Anyway, I don't know. I don't know what more to say about that. So there you go. Okay. All right. Thank you for all your work. We're your family. The world is your family. Absolutely. And thank you. All right. All right. Amway creators were NED Reagan fundraisers. Interesting. Jay Van Andel and Rich DeVos. Well, Betsy DeVos, we know who she is. There you go. I didn't know that. Well, there you go. You learn something new every day. Not surprising. Not surprising. Interesting information, Jason. And we know who Betsy DeVos is, right? I mean, she's Trump's Secretary of Education. She's, billionaire. Don't watch Doctor Who, unfortunately. Like I said, Joe, can't answer it. Roger Corman, don't know about that. A false warning about a North Korean missile attack. I remember that. Yeah. I remember when that happened. Yeah, I remember that in Hawaii. Wasn't she already elected, though? I could swear she was already elected. Wasn't she? I could swear she was already elected at that time. Maybe I'm wrong. But wasn't she already in office, Tulsi? I could swear. Because I remember when that happened, right? And that, I remember everyone was panicking and they thought a nuclear... but maybe I'm wrong. To run for president, right? That's when she decided to run for president. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I'm with you, John. I gotcha. Yeah, I remember that when everyone's phone in Hawaii went off with the false nuclear missile warning. I remember that. Michael Moore ended his movie, his anti-Trump movie with scenes of that. And they set up, Trump, I think, set up a presidential alarm system, if I'm not mistaken. I think he set up one when he was president. So there you go. Yeah, I do remember when that happened. That's what made her decide to run for president. Yeah, she was already in Congress already. And, her views were different. When she first came in, she was a Democrat, but her views were different. And she's shifted and evolved over the years. Tulsi Gabbard is interesting. Look, folks, of course, Tulsi Gabbard has backing from the deep state. And this is a really common mistake I see from people, is that they want to be like, oh, my God, that person's tied to the deep state. Good. Right? There are divisions in the ruling class. You got to be strategic. Read my book, Where is America Going? Chapter 3 about gangs and counter gangs and revolutionaries and counter gangs and all of that. When people do this thing, it's like, oh my God, this person's part of the conspiracy. It's like, you don't understand. There's divisions in the ruling class. There's strategic. And, if someone like Tulsi Gabbard is connected to the deep state and talking the way they are, that's a good thing, because most of the deep state is talking another way. Right? And the fact that the deep state has to offer some support and put up somebody who speaks that way is a good thing. Right? And the people don't get that. They want to just be like, oh my God, we need someone who's not part of the conspiracy. No, you don't get it. You don't get it. Okay? Divisions in the ruling class, strategic alliances. Tulsi Gabbard represents a faction within the military. And that's good. And we should try to support that faction as much as we can, because they're the ones that don't want World War III. Oh boy. All righty. I was on Iraq's side back then. I do not agree that I was confused, but like you, I'm on Iran's side today. Yeah, and that makes sense, John. And that makes sense, I can understand, how a lot of leftists would be on Iraq's side back then, right? Having gone to Iran, having seen what I've seen, I will not be on Iraq's side ever. I will maintain that this was an effort by the imperialists to divide two anti-imperialist forces. That's what I will maintain. I could never support Iraq invading Iran based on the people I know. I mean, the people I met and the people that were, martyred during that war and what I saw. And I would never be on Iraq's side, but I can understand why somebody would be, right? I mean, and that, look, there were a lot of people who thought Khomeini was some kind of imperialist psyop. And, Khomeini may have gotten some support. I mean, it is possible that, fearing a communist revolution in Iran, Khomeini got some British or American backing. That's possible, right? I'm not ruling that out. But at the same time, we do know that, you want to talk about election meddling. Let's just throw this out there and then we can end. It's been a great stream tonight. You want to talk about election meddling? We all know that Ronald Reagan asked Khomeini to keep the hostages. Khomeini was going to release the hostages, the Iran hostages. Ronald Reagan asked Khomeini not to release them until Jimmy Carter left office. So the day Ronald Reagan got elected, they released the hostages. And now we find out, can you imagine that? Ronald Reagan goes to a foreign government that's an enemy of the United States, that's kidnapped a bunch of Americans, and says, can you hold them a little longer? It'll help me boost in the polls. You know? And I mean, they want to eulogize this guy. You talk about election meddling. My God. You don't talk about election meddling. Jesus Christ. You know, that's pretty bad. That's pretty bad. You know, that is pretty bad. And when I was in Iran, I talked to the Iranians. I actually did an interview. I hope it airs someday. I hope I someday can get the footage of it. They never gave it to me, but I sat down and did an interview with cameras with a woman who had been one of the hostage takers. And I interviewed her about what that was like. It was a great conversation. One of the things I asked her was about that. And she said, well, Khomeini said we had to hold the hostages until Jimmy Carter left office, because if not, we would have been a Soviet-aligned country. And that Jimmy Carter was seen as the candidate who would be softer on the Soviet Union. And Iran did not want the USA to see them as Soviet-aligned. And I thought that was an interesting answer. But that basically Iran, they did that favor for Carter because they didn't want to be viewed as a Soviet-aligned country, which I think is fascinating. But, I mean, you know, Hunter Biden's laptop, I mean, all of this, right? I mean, keeping the hostages until Ronald Reagan took office. You want to talk about election meddling? I mean, that's election meddling, if there ever was such a thing. All right, folks, I'm going to say goodnight for now. I'll be back tomorrow night. Tune into the stream that I do with Lori Spencer and others. It'll be a Twitter space. That's going to be good. I'll probably be back Monday. I might be back tomorrow night. Who knows? Depends how I feel, but I'll definitely be back on Monday. We're going to do a lot of streaming. So, yeah. Talk to you all soon. I'm going to put on the closing music. In the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. And while the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today.